Mapleton School District Number 32 School Board meeting. Our mission is to provide a supportive and safe learning environment where all students are encouraged and empowered to reach their educational and personal potential. Let's stand for flag salute. Please, want to lead us?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, is that you? There we go. All these pretty floors.
I know.
You know what? They're so good though, they'll sweep right up.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
We'll tell I'll tell them it was me. Okay. They'll still like you.
Any changes in the agenda? Nothing?
9.3.
Is this you?
No. Actually, both of them. So 9.3 will move to next month.
September.
Okay.
Yeah, we're waiting
thought that was supposed
for
to be
the
Agreement.
thank you, grant agreement from ODE, and thought we were gonna have that. And then we can add to hiring Sean Walker for preschool assistant.
Should point 2 go before point 1 on that personnel thing, or no?
Ooh, I don't know if that matters.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we do them both at the same time.
Oh,
just
okay.
combinations.
Good point though.
Okay. Any public comment?
On agenda items, no.
No. Okay, well, we are going to swear in Abby Kimball. So Abby, how about if you stand? And raise your right hand. I, Abby Kimball,
I, Abby Kimball,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution and the laws of the State of Oregon,
the Constitution and the laws of the State of Oregon,
and the policies of Mapleton School District Number 32.
and the policies of Mapleton School District Number 32.
During my term,
During my term,
I will faithfully and impartially discharge the responsibilities
I will faithfully and impartially discharge the responsibilities
of the office to the best of my ability.
of the office to the best of my ability.
Welcome to the team. Yay. All right. Okay, so we are going to turn this over to you, Mr. Wilson Architecture. And you're going to tell us about our TAP grant progress, yeah?
Great. Well, thank you very much. It is really wonderful to be back and doing some work for the school district. So for some of the board members are familiar with me, and others I have not met before. So Kurt Wilson, my firm is Wilson Architecture, and I'm going to walk through some of the kind of where we are with the TAP grant.
Can I ask one question? When did you become Wilson Architect?
In a couple years ago.
Okay.
So I was a principal of Pivot Architecture for a long time, and through my role at Pivot Architecture, led the pre-bond work, and starting in 2015 through the bond improvements and seismic improvements in this building and the elementary school through 2019. And
All right,
left
thanks.
Pivot a little bit after that. I actually did something else for a couple of years, and then started my firm, this firm. So it's really wonderful to be involved. I love the school district, and I love Mapleton, and I enjoy being here all the time. And it's been wonderful to be part of the improvements, and I'm excited to help talk about some of the other buildings. So we're going to focus. Actually, I've got the. Can I control? Okay, that'll be great. So I'll go.
You can just unplug it, just unplug it.
Is it just power?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go pretty quickly with slides, but I have a lot of them, and Sue. You want to at some point kind of push me along, or if you have more discussion, I'll kind of leave that up to you. So, in terms of what we're doing here, advancing. So what we're gonna go over is just a quick overview of where we are in the grant process. Talk about some potential improvements to consider, and then what our next steps are. So we're gonna, the buildings we're gonna focus on in the campus, we're gonna focus on the middle school, the south wing of the elementary school. At the time that we did the rest of the improvements for the high school and the elementary school, the south wing wasn't really being used. And so we were able to reorganize things so that we could actually get all the K through 12 or K through 5 program or 6 program out of the south wing into the rest of the school, and that space has been used for pre-K and other things. And so that's the only area that wasn't fully upgraded at the time of those improvements. The industrial arts building, the shop building, the pool, grandstand, and the concessions building. So those are all the remaining buildings on the campus. The one thing that isn't being discussed is the transportation building where Randy's office is. And the district received 3 grants through the technical assistance program from the Department of Education that's providing the funding for the design team. The grants are a facility assessment, seismic assessments, and then hazardous material assessment or something like that. Essentially, the last one is funding to do testing for asbestos content, materials with asbestos content. We'll talk about that at the end and as I go. The seismic assessment is the beginning of a process that's set up through the Department of Education and this technical assistance grant, but also through another entity, Business Oregon, that manages a seismic rehabilitation grant program that will pay for improvements, and prerequisite for getting those grants is to do an assessment. In 2016, assessments of the high school and the elementary school were done. We applied for a grant, and those 2 buildings received those seismic assessments. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end. And then the facility assessment is the primary grant right now. That basically, the Department of Education has created this facility assessment program so that all districts would have access to the grant and be able to do a facility assessment in a very specific format that they determine. And it's basically a database. You basically update an Excel file. It generates cost in this facility assessment document that feeds a database that they use. And their primary purpose is to be able to go to legislature and say, schools, deferred maintenance for schools in Oregon is $6.8 billion, or whatever they want to use. They're trying to use that for very specific macro level advocacy, which is difficult in Oregon because we have very decentralized school district facility funding, right? But it's a good tool in that it gets a team of architects and engineers to look at buildings and to look at everything. The floor, the foundation, the walls, the roof, all that kind of stuff. But the actual output from the facility assessment document that's required isn't overly helpful to you, right? It's really a checklist that's helpful. So we did the walkthrough earlier in the summer. When I say we, I'm the architect. I have a structural engineering firm, mechanical electrical engineering firm on the team as well. So that all of those disciplines are part of this process. We did our walkthrough and just have filled out in draft form the checklist, and so we'll wrap that up at some point here. But more importantly, what I want to do with the information that we have is to talk to you about kind of what to me what I think the most important items to consider are. And again, this grant is to pay for the services to do these grants. It doesn't pay for any improvements. It doesn't really go very far beyond what's going to happen this next few months. And so that's the challenge. Obviously, it's always the challenge, right? Is how do you pay for something? So we'll talk about that a little bit as well.
What's the amount of the grants?
What's that?
What is the amount of the grants?
The facility assessments, 20,000, I think they're all, it's either 20 or 25,000, and, yeah, and then
Each one's
there's like
50.
45,000 in total. And, you know, they have to be used for those particular, you know, grants, and the asbestos grant is, will be used for doing field sampling and laboratory testing of the other buildings, and that hasn't happened yet. In fact, I check in, that should happen relatively soon. I want to make sure that if we have any, I want to go back and look at if there's any spaces that are used for instruction, that we deal with that before teachers show up in 10 days. I think most of the spaces are not, with the exception of the Watershed Council being in the middle school building. We should be okay to work around that as we go. So I'm going to just kind of walk through in a similar format of these buildings, and to kind of give you an overview. For the middle school, you know, we still call it the middle school. I don't know. I still call it the middle school. I don't know that, you know, it's not really the middle school anymore. You know, it has. I've always loved as I come off the highway and turn into the district and see the middle school and the high school beyond. It's just, you know, has a really wonderful presence. It's a historic building, and it looks great from that, you know, from a distance. I think it also has, you know, good potential space for support services, wraparound services, and you know, kind of take that wraparound services to more of a level than we've been talking about. But there's potential for that building, and it has a tenant, and it could have more tenants, and it has it demonstrates that it's got ability to be, you know, a modest revenue source for the district and kind of support more community needs. To me, that's what the potential of it is. It's got a lot of needs, and I'm not summarizing all of them here, but I'm mostly concerned immediately about the floor tile and the asbestos in the spaces that are on the east end that were potentially going to be used for the LCC class. And that it's got tiles that are the old asbestos, they're actually called asbestos tile. They're 9 by 9. These are 12 by 12, and these don't have asbestos in it. In one of the rooms in particular, they're actually coming up. So while the asbestos is contained within the tile in general, they're breaking, and they're actually potentially friable, and it's important to get our hands around that and figure out a plan to get rid of that as those tiles are being used. So there's a lot of, and there's, of course, in the attic, there's a lot of, there's asbestos as well that's in a more manageable situation. But that's a concern to make sure we have our hands around that. I've clumped together accessibility and seismic standards together. Really the bigger issue is the accessibility standards. Every entrance in the building is elevated, and there's not one entrance into the building. There's no entrance into the building that is accessible except for the two rooms that are on the east side that are used, that are at a different level than everything else. By the way, I'm speaking about these buildings as though we all go in them all the time. So if you're not aware, I don't have plans of everything. If you're not please, you know, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, let me know. I do have a plan, and I'll talk
Everybody here knows
about
those buildings.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty.
Okay. So the accessibility is a concern for its ability to be used for other uses to happen in the space quickly. And I'll talk about that a little bit further down the road in a couple of slides. The accessibility standards is less of a concern in terms of its practicality. The building certainly doesn't meet accessibility codes per the code as it is now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's unsafe. There's a very big difference there. It's probably not going to meet the standards of, unfortunately, loss of life to be able to qualify for a seismic grant. And so that's going to be a question. The way the seismic grant program works is that there's a factor of the danger to the public relative to the cost to upgrade. And so buildings that are used intensively, like with a gym, or, you know, basically have a lot of use with a lot of people, are ones that just or just get better scores. And so that's the challenge here, is middle school just just doesn't have enough activity to score well. So that doesn't mean that it's, you know, it can't be seismically upgraded. It's still a fairly competitive process, the grant program. There's about 50 million a year cycle that's awarded, and so that's going to be something that yeah, I don't know, we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end about the seismic grant, but I wouldn't lump those two together. I just did that for space reasons. Accessibility is more of my concern. And then upgrading the spaces is something. Old carpet, you know, it's, you know, we've got an occupant in the building. We talked a lot about that. There's some concerns about water. That is something that I really want to address. So there's a lot of issues there. The concern with the, you know, there's an exterior entrance or access point on all 4 sides. And in all cases, it's elevated from the grade. And this was more of a design issue than anything else. It's just, you know, at a time when buildings were kind of set up and were elevated from the ground to have a little bit more of a feeling of grandeur. So that to be able to accommodate more uses and to meet, to do tenant improvements, to be able to accommodate future uses, going to have a plan to think about accessibility. It could be done that any tenant could make the route to their space accessible, but that's not the most efficient thing long term for the district. It's best to think about this the district as the mall operator or the landlord who wants to have multiple tenants. And so having a system of restrooms, water service, other things that are in good shape, ready to go, so that if when any kind of a provider wants to come and rent a couple of spaces, it's a relatively easy process for them. That's the way that's the way I'm encouraging you to think about this, and it is challenging. And I'll show you a plan of that now. But it does, you know, I do like its presence. I like like this building, we were able to do the improvements without fundamentally changing the character of the building, and that can happen with subsequent improvements. One of the challenges with the entrances, the 2 primary entrances, the one off the parking lot side, the west, that's primarily used, not only do you have stairs from the outside to get into the door, but you're looking on this upper left photo, you then have a small landing and more stairs. And so just simply getting a ramp to the door level, and this applies to both the south facing, the main door that doesn't really use. In both cases, they have those 2 levels. So getting a ramp to the door isn't going to solve the problem. Really, we need a ramp to the floor level, and therefore thinking about replacing the doors is something to consider here as we do that. Restrooms are also, you know, they are restrooms that are appropriate for schools a while ago, right? They have a lot of fixtures, they're close together. What we really need now is just simply more accessible spaces in the restrooms, or more accessible fixtures, but less fixtures. The way we're able to accommodate accessibility in this building is we took out about half the toilets and had more space around them. And so within the same restroom area, we converted non-accessible restrooms to accessible. And then, you know, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that it really is beautiful in the building looking out. I mean, the wonderful thing about the setting of the campus is you don't have to look out any window to, you know, be able to enjoy the nature and enjoy, you know, what's beautiful in terms of the setting. And I don't want to lose sight of that as we talk about the problems. You know, the building also has some infrastructure challenges and also some benefits. There's the roofs. We have 2 types of roofs where you see and this is not unlike this building and the elementary school. The white roofs are called single ply or membrane roofing, and those are, that's a little bit newer and lasts a little bit longer than the asphalt shingles, which you see the gray roof on the more sloping surfaces. I believe that this building and the high school's asphalt shingles were done about the same time. We did not replace those on the high school because they were something like 10 years old at the time. But they're getting closer to the age where they're gonna need to get replaced, and that's something to be thinking about from a deferred maintenance budget, just the replacement of the roof. There's a robust attic all through the sloped roof system. That's got a lot of the mechanical equipment, with the exception of some existing pipe insulation that's got asbestos in it that's somewhat contained. Generally, the attics, nothing we really need to spend time addressing there. There's 2 boiler rooms in the building that are both underutilized spaces, but they're just really difficult to try and capture. So I think they're there, but they're just more space for storage. As Randy has done a really good job of maximizing space for storage. The other issue with the elementary school, and you see that in the lower right, that is the original electrical service for the building.
Wow.
And what you don't see in the attic is when the mechanical system was put in 2002 for the middle school, there was electrical service brought into the attic for the new mechanical system. It used to be an old boiler and a steam, and you can, if you look out on the middle school, just as outside the end of the building there, you'll see 3 pipes coming through the wall. So there used to be a steam boiler that was in the middle school and actually served the heat for both this building and that building. And that's been abandoned, but the rooms remain. The electrical service for the mechanical system was upgraded in 2002, but not the rest of the building. So that electrical panel is the one that serves the lights and the power is old. And I'm not sure if you have problems as a tenant with power, but that's a
yes.
concern, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's places that we can't plug into, or, like we can't overload, we can't, plug 2 things into.
Yeah, okay, that's my concern. So that's something that I'm gonna need a little bit more to understand. But going back to the idea of the middle school being a building that tenants can come in relatively quickly, electricals, something to be, thinking about with that. The building itself, the floor plan of the building, is anybody on Zoom? If I walk around and point to the screen, is that gonna be a problem for anybody? Okay. So I'm just gonna point this out because it's a little bit easier here, but, so this is the west entrance off the parking lot. This is the area that the Watershed Council occupies, and then this is that south-facing entrance, that is the main entrance. And then there's back out to the north, being the middle school, there's another exit. So there's a good hallway system here, but again, there's stairs and level changes at each location. And what I think we should consider here is an accessible upgrade either at this entrance or maybe in this area, which had been considered in the past. And then where there's at the end of the hallway, there's a stair at the end of this hallway, but there's an office in the middle. So originally there was a stair that served at the end of the hallway, and as this space got reorganized, this office got put in. I think we should take that out, and I think we should think about that hallway or the end of that as an accessible exit. And then we have a fully accessible exiting system. So that's something I don't have that drawn, but I want you to be thinking about that as an accessible upgrade to the building. So the middle school's got a lot of things to talk about, and I'm going to keep moving here on items. And
Can I ask one question really quick? Just, so you talked about it like being, let's see, the renovations being so that it could like have tenants in it and stuff like that. As a district, like, are we also, would that mean that if we needed to use it for academics again and occupy it for students, it would also meet requirements for that?
yeah,
Same thing.
yes. So the requirements for students, there may be some Department of Education issues with supervision and other things, but essentially it's what the building code requires.
Yeah.
The building code requires that any new building or modified buildings meet the current code, which isn't accessible. It needs to be accessible. The building as it is now, just being used as it's being used, it does not trigger an accessibility upgrade for the code. But if if there's some spaces that are modified, then they need to be made accessible. And so making them accessible for that, and the way that I would want to do this with an accessible, what's referred to as an egress system, connecting the hallways from one end to the other together, creating that as an accessible system in the building then serves all tenants, whether it's students or whatever it might be.
Okay, and in terms of like bathroom and stuff like that, like, I'm just thinking if we did for some reason want to reoccupy that building for students, like as long, I'd want to think of it from that perspective too, and trying to make sure that we made the space functional in that way too, if we're making changes.
Yeah, the challenge is with the restrooms, which are in, there's a restrooms in this area that have multiple fixtures, and then there's a toilet in a room. I'm not going to go as far as to say it's a restroom. It's a toilet in a closet, and that's a generous description. It would be relatively easy to make this one or two accessible restrooms by just taking fixtures out, but they're still kind of close to each other. So we start thinking about the broader context of integrating students with other school uses and separations. It gets a little bit more complicated. That's going to require a little bit more thought and conversation on how to make that work.
Yeah.
One other thing I'll point out here is that these two rooms are probably 42 inches lower than the rest of the building. And there's a sloping surface. I'm not going to call it a ramp because a ramp has a definition per the code, and this is much steeper than a ramp, and we will never be able to modify that.
It's a slide.
It's a slide. We would not be able to modify that area to have a reasonable accessible route from here to there. And so the best way to think about that is don't worry about this being accessible. If we have an accessible route here, then you can get there from the outside.
And
that's the way
there
to
are
think
two
about that.
accessible doors on either side of that to go in and out.
That's kind of the idea. The challenge is, I was going to say without getting too wonky, but I think I've crossed that bridge anyway. Accessibility, or from an exiting perspective, you have to have 51% of your required exits have to be accessible. So if you have two, they both have to be accessible. If you have three, and you could get by without one. But the problem is, who are you serving, and are you worried about the equity issues of having someone who needs accessibility requirements, but they're in a spot where it's not accessible because you made that determination. So that's an issue that I think needs to be discussed. And one of the things I was thinking about as I was walking around tonight, in 2015, around the time that the study started, the board developed a series of, guiding principles for the improvements. And one of those, and there was like safety and security and student environment, and one of them was accessibility. And that was an important tool to make the improvements that we did at the elementary school. We reorganized completely the circulation of the elementary school. And in part it was because the guiding principles were beyond what the code requires. And so that's something to be thinking about, and how to think about that for the middle school itself. So, okay, I'm going to keep going here. The south wing of the elementary school, it's in good shape. We re-roofed it, and we did seismic improvements as part of the bond work. We didn't modify any existing spaces. However, in 2020, there was some work done. There was some asbestos taken out and some other things. So I believe that the space is, I don't think there's really anything of concern in the south wing of the elementary school in terms of how it's being used now. Underneath, one of the engineers noted that there's somewhere, and I didn't get a chance to see it, where there looks like there might be some water working in behind the retaining wall, and it might be in the enclosed space. I don't know that I'm too concerned about that, but I'll check in with Randy on that one. But all things considered, elementary school south wing is in good shape. And I think there's other things to kind of focus on. Some of the photos there in the upper right, we filled in the lower level. You see where those two garage doors is. That was all open, like you see beyond the photo, and that was part of the seismic improvements. And we also created a storage room there. The industrial arts building, I love that building. It's nice and open. It's a simple building, and you can, in a good way, and you can see the structure. And I think that's a really useful tool when you're thinking about STEM programs and things like that, to be able to strive it. So I think it's a really valuable building as a teaching tool. It also has spaces for shop and activities and art now that are great to complement these more conventional classrooms and the rest of the buildings. It's recently been connected to the primary septic system on site, so that's great. It can increase the restroom load based on that connection. I also think its proximity to the high school is great in terms of being able to support those other activities. So it's in good shape. It's a good position, and it's a building that has a lot of potential. It is also a building that was built when we just heated. We just put in a lot of dams, and we thought power was going to be cheap forever, and there's no insulation, and so that's, it needs to be improved. Its thermal envelope needs to be improved. It doesn't meet current seismic standards, but again, not a high priority in terms of, I don't think that's a dangerous situation. It also doesn't allow multiple classes to be multiple separate classes to be happening simultaneously. And that's something that, that's primarily the focus here, what we'll talk about. Its roof is in pretty good shape. It's relatively new, and I was happy to see that, and some different spaces in the building. A little bit, and I'm going to show you some different design options that Sue and I have discussed for the industrial arts building. So we'll come back to that. So the pool. I started coming here in 2015, and I would say that my appreciation for the pool building has evolved significantly from 2015 when I first came, and I could visualize kid playing in the pool, and that great space and those wonderful glulam beams and all that kind of stuff. Now what I see is a building that I think is a concern. I don't see a use for it. I worry about it being at some point, maybe not today, maybe not in 2024, but at some point it's going to be a hazard. That the building is just going to continue to deteriorate, and that's going to be a concern. So that's, I've been having a hard time describing the attributes of that building. It does have components of a pool. I don't know that really can be turned back into a pool feasibly. But it also, one of the things I think is worth focusing on is where it sits on campus and how it can support some other activities, or how that space can get used. So that's a little bit of a focus we'll talk about. I think the needs, one of the most significant needs is it's a huge hole in the ground. And however you look at it, it's going to be challenging and expensive to simply fill it in or cover it up if it's not filled in with water. There's the building walls and the roof are just showing, particularly on the forest side, on the east side, nobody goes back there, and so a lot of people don't realize how advanced the decay is on the east side. It's concerning. And again, I don't know that I'm aware of a need that the district has for that building in that location as a district. So that's kind of where my thoughts on that, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time there. This, to me, I love this photo because it says everything good and bad. It's this cool space with these cool beams, and you see the holes in the pool. And there's a story behind those, and I know why they were done, and we've actually eliminated that problem. But it also shows how deep that pool is. It's a hard, it's deep and it needs to get filled in. But I got to imagine when it was first built and first used, it would have been a really cool place for the community to use. The upper right is the east wall, and you can see, just from a distance, you can see a lot of mold and mildew, but you're not necessarily seeing the exposed wood structure because the siding is decayed completely and water is just getting in there. It does have, one end of the building, and I'll show this in a plan, it's got restrooms or locker rooms, and it's got, the exercise room, on both sides of the pool area. So there's a lot to that building, and there might be some ways to think about using some of it. The grandstands, when we did the study in 2015, we looked at the grandstands and the concessions building, but we didn't really pay attention to it. So I want to talk a little bit more about it. In terms of the attributes of the space, a few years back, I came up for a game, and just a Friday night under the lights. It's just really cool. And the grandstands are a nice attribute. I'm in Eugene, and none of our high schools have covered grandstands, so it's cool to have that. It's also nice to be protected, and it actually has an elevated press box or coach's box. And so, there's some nice things about that. I'm a little concerned about some of the foundation. I went back and looked at it again. I'm maybe not as concerned as I was, but I'm more concerned about the elevated press box. It's both a nice thing, but it's also a concern, and I'll explain that here in a couple of photos. So I don't think these photos really convey the challenge with the press box. So is there a marker I can mark on that?
There's dryers.
Yeah, right under the.
So you understand this, there's the wall of the press box, and then the tracks up here and the football fields down here. So this is the wall, and then there's a column in the middle, and the grandstands go like this, and the roof structure cantilevers out and goes like that. So you see that column and you see the cantilever. The press box sits, half of it sits on this cantilever for the beam. And that creates some problems for what it could do seismically. And it would be much better if that press box sat over where the beam is in a better loading condition. So that's a seismic concern with the press box. It's also the press box is deteriorated pretty bad and needs to be addressed. The bigger issue with the press box, though, is you get to it from a ladder on the backside of the grandstands, and I think you can actually see in that where it says, where it says sailor. That's actually where the ladder is. A press box, the codes actually address this, accessibility codes address this, and one of the reasons why the Eugene high schools don't have a covered grandstands is because the press box needs to be accessible and would have needed an elevator. So I'm not suggesting that go to the extent of making an accessible press box here. I'm thinking that probably the press box is something that can go away, and the grandstands, the upper level of the grandstands can be used for the coaches and those kinds of things. And so I think that's I'm assuming it's being used during games.
Yeah, it is, yep.
So I'm not, I'm not suggesting that I'm gonna go up there and kick people out or anything like that, but I do think thinking about it from a longer term perspective, its safety is somewhat of a concern, the accessibility is somewhat of a concern. And that's something to think about.
Yeah. Just for clarification, if we repair it, it needs to be to code. What's the difference between repairing and renovating?
So yes, the code is a comprehensive tool that covers a variety of things: energy efficiency, accessibility, structural issues. It could be a relatively simple solution to rebuild the press box structurally. The accessibility issues are more of a challenge. But that could be dealt with in a special use application for something like a lift that's brought in for construction, you know? Something like that could be used to get people in. So there's some ways to deal with it for the isolated use of, you know, primarily for the, you know, 4, 5, 6 football games. But that's really what we're talking about. It's used for pretty sparingly. So that's you know, that's the challenge, is just the intensity of use. So the concession building is has restrooms and has water on that in the campus. That's, you know, pretty far away from everything else. So there's something that's a nice attribute there. You don't want to lose that. I'm more concerned about the rot around the roof overhang, and I've walked around again, and I'm much more concerned now than I was when I put the PowerPoint together. So I think that's something concerning. The concession stand building itself has the restrooms on one end, and then the multiple spaces that create the concession area. And they're just, it's unnecessary to have the spaces like that are in there. It's just really cumbersome and hard to use. And so it would be, you know, it's something that could be improved spatially, but my bigger concern is the overhangs. So what the photo on the right, so that's where it has the posts that are coming out. You can look, and if you go up there, you'll see that that was added on. And so the original building had a modest overhang, and then the horizontal members that come out the sides were added on, and the posts were added on, and the roof was extended. And the problem is these members that are hanging out off to the side are rotted and almost completely gone, and they're supporting the roof overhang out here. And the member on this member right there, you don't see it well in that photo, it's nearly gone. And I'm not, has this been used in the last season?
Yeah, this weekend.
I worry about a heavy rain. I guess I'm probably not going to be a snow when a game's happening, but there certainly can be a heavy rain in October, November. And I worry about that roof collapsing with somebody underneath it. And so, what I was thinking about when I was putting this together is this would be a wonderful opportunity for a vocational program to rebuild the roof on this building. That's probably something that could get organized and planned in a year or so with students and volunteers and something like that. I'm more concerned about this fall, which is just a few weeks away. So that concerns me, and I want to have a little bit more conversation with structural engineer, and probably ought to get Randy into the conversation about what we do there.
Yeah, like, is there something that could be done just temporarily that would support it, that like ties, you know, from below, that like, you know, or something that we
Yeah,
because
it's possible that the side window, you know, this is the side facing where the playground equipment is now, and that overhang is where I'm most concerned. And it may be that I'm less concerned about the overhang at the main window. It's where it's cantilevering off there that concerns me, and so it's, you know, maybe there's just a post, if a new beam gets added and a post gets added, it just makes it kind of awkward to use that, and maybe that it's a combination of that and just not using that side window or something.
yeah.
But that's the conversation that we should have.
Because I don't think we use that side of it.
I don't think so. I think we use that
It's
front
only that
side.
front side for where we
It's-
have interaction.
It might be better than, if that's not getting used, to actually cut the roof off.
Just take it
It
off.
wouldn't take much to cut it off and just have a modest overhang, because that's what it was, you know, the overhang, there's opening on all sides. The restroom openings are have an overhang, and I understand that because it rains a lot here.
Yeah.
But that's the concern, so that's something I think needs to be addressed.
Right.
Like immediately.
Yeah.
Like,
For the first game.
Yeah.
immediately, so.
It seems like that solution of just taking that piece of the roof off is the easiest thing, and just
I mean,
do that.
right, and the only thing there is, like,
Yeah.
I assume you have
It-
to take
it
that
might
piece
be-
off, it would expose the rest of it to more.
It might be easier to put a post and a concrete pier block underneath the end of that. So I think it needs to be looked at a little bit. but-
Because it is still protecting the rest of the building a little bit from.
Yeah, so
exposure.
in this, on this side, you see, if you, right where the cursor is, it's dark.
Mhm.
There's actually a new pressure-treated roof rafter that was installed on the east side, but not on the west side. The rafters are not my concern, it's the knee brace piece that's coming off that's rotted. That's the biggest concern. So there's some, that just needs to be, when we did our walkthrough for all the buildings, we did that in a day. And realizing now we didn't spend enough time really looking at that roof, and that's something we need to do. So I'll reach back out in the next day or two and we can talk more about that. So let's talk about some improvements, spatial improvements beyond just the kind of the deferred maintenance type of improvements. The first is industrial arts. And this is really trying to address the issue of simultaneous classes happening in the building. Right now, it has a small classroom, which has also been used as an office, a restroom, which is operational. Well, the fact that it's got a toilet and urinal, it's not accessible, and it obviously doesn't, not really an appropriate mixed gender restroom, and there's not enough in the building, and that's a concern. And then there's 3 shop spaces that are in here now, and this was added on over time, and these are kind of storage spaces and some electrical room. Where you see this kind of crosshatch area, that's where there's interior concrete masonry blocks. So these are some pretty hard walls that are not that easy to modify, and that's a thing.
Are they structural, like, do they?
Probably, but not insurmountable. I'm gonna assume from what I'm seeing here is that this wall is load bearing, and then there's beams that span across. So they're more just expensive to move.
Right.
That's the bigger issue there.
Sure.
So a couple of different thoughts here in terms of, what happened? You can't read those numbers, but the classroom is about 450 square feet, and this room is about 1,300 square feet. So just hold that in your memory bank. Okay, so an option is to create a hall. In both cases, what I'm trying to do is 2 things. Create 2 restrooms that are single occupant and that are accessible. And so the green are the restrooms, the purple is a hallway or circulation space, and then the orange is a impacted classroom. So this option is basically putting a wall in here and here, and then adding a door, taking out what that little office space, or that in some ways it might be a finishing room in the shop, taking out the restroom, and then rebuilding restrooms in this location. This classroom would remain. This classroom would remain untouched, and that we would basically reduce this shop space from about 1,300 square feet to 820 square feet. What that allows us is a circulation system, so that you can come in through the door, either of these doors, and get to restroom, the classroom, this shop space, and this space that could be used in a variety of different ways without interrupting other classes. That's a relatively modest improvement, but it does reduce that shop space, which is kind of the primary use space.
Do you have an approximate price tag for that renovation?
No, I haven't tried to put numbers together at all. I wanted to. That'll be a next step. I want to just see what we think about these. Another option, and I'm going to kind of toggle back here. Just notice where the main door is. This is the existing main door, and so this one is keeps that wall between the office and the shop intact, fills in the door and puts a new door on this end, and so the hallway is here, makes that small classroom more of an office type space, or it could be used in a variety of different ways. Could be some study areas where the cursor is. It could be a wall, and it could be two, kind of two smaller spaces. This keeps that that shop space almost at its same size. There's hallway added here, so it's a little bit smaller. In both cases, the restrooms are in the same location. So these are some relatively simple improvements that don't chop up this space too badly, but provides an exiting system that works. We need to be able to, once you get in it, you got to get out without, fire. Basically, the fire exiting is assumes a fire's in one place. So if the fire stops you, you can turn around and go a different direction. So you got to have access points at both ends. So that's a way to address the industrial arts building to make it more usable as a classroom. And then the pool. So, like I said, I don't see the future of a pool building here, and that's what the premise of my comments are. And when we had this conversation in 2019, there was a different board with some different perspectives here. But I think the future of this building is probably not a pool, and that's what we're looking at here. So, and again, keep in mind the pool sits at this lower level where there's an elementary school. This is the south wing that's 2 stories, and so it's stepping down the hill. It has what was a play area for the pool, or for the elementary school. That's kind of been moved up to the upper level, so this is somewhat of an underutilized space, but it's a flat area that's big enough for kickball and some not quite big enough for softball or ultimate, but it is a play area that's relatively flat. There is a road that goes to adjacent properties along the creek there as well. There's technically a path you can drive back up here, and that's something that I keep in mind is there a different way to access this building? Is a different way for this building to serve the community and not necessarily a primary school district academic use is kind of what I've been thinking about.
And there's also a road, like, I don't know, it's not a road, but like running here and down in front of the middle school building. Like there's a lower kind of. Yeah, it gets really steep in there, and it's however you slice it, it's challenging to get there, but there's potentially some options there. Right, it's steep, yeah.
It's pretty.
There's like maybe room there for an access, like to develop access or something.
Right. Yeah, and this is the
Yes.
I'm not sure at what point it goes from a public drive to a private drive, but I believe some of it is public. That goes past the site, and then from that there's an access road that goes up. So I have 3 different thoughts here. The first is, this is the building as it is now, so the pool, the pool room, and then this end, and so north is to the right. This is where the pool equipment is, and this is a space that it's been used as family room, fitness room, those kinds of things. This is a fairly traditional changing area. The boys and girls side, you come in, you separate, you go through, you shower up, and you go out. Kind of a fun maze. That is intact. It's got a lot of it's got a lot of toilets. It's got some showers. It's got a lot of elements there. And then this is a section cut or a profile through the pool. So this is, if you went straight across here, sliced it open and looked at the side, so you see the roof profile. There's the big glulam beams. This is the profile of the pool, and then you can see the roof over the restroom area and the roof over the pool room. So a couple of different thoughts. The first one is to create a usable building without changing the building exterior shape, is to basically put a floor structure over the pool, like an elevated floor level. And that could be done. We could actually cut into the pool, put some footings in like this, and then support a post, and kind of work around the pool. The bigger challenge in that scenario is not only are we filling in the pool, but all of the pool deck around the pool slopes to the pool. And so all of that needs to get addressed, and it needs to be flattened out, and that's, you know, they're just more expensive. So that's somewhat of a challenge. And I'm not worrying about reorganizing these spaces. I'm really thinking about just, you know, make this building last longer and then use for something. I think all of the exterior walls and the roof need attention, need to either be rebuilt or, you know, in the case of the roof, needs new roofing, and it needs some structural attention to it as well. What you're not seeing in the simple structure is that actually the roof steps down at every, it's kind of cool looking, at every, between beams. The problem is it's not it's now disjointed in terms of how it works as a structural seismic resisting element, and so it just adds to the complexity of the seismic improvements. So this is will be an expensive solution, and you still end up having basically the building that you have now. The downside of the pool building, unfortunately, is that, you know, while over the end of the high dive area, it's relatively high, as you get further down, it's not. Doesn't really work for a gym in terms of basketball and volleyball have higher clearances, so it's not really allowing you to do that. It could be used for, you know, a variety of activities in that regard. So it has a potential of being Pilates and yoga and other activities like that with showers. There might be some uses there for that, but you've also got some other buildings, other spaces in these buildings to be able to do that. So this is one that I just don't feel like the building really lends itself because of its shape for the potential of being repurposed. It's not tall enough to be able to add a second story, so there's some challenges with it. So,
It's just on that roof, it's also not insulated at all, right?
correct.
With
Yes,
one
and that's
insulated.
more challenging too.
Yeah.
So the most straightforward option is to tear the building down and fill the hole in the ground.
Mhm.
And that's not inexpensive, particularly with how do you fill that hole? And you know, if you put in 20 or 12 feet of just kind of not carelessly, but just throw dirt or debris in there, then you'll never be able to use that area of the site to support a building like you might want to be able to do. So then the other option is, well, do we prepare that like a building foundation and really, you know, well pack that in? So filling it in is the least expensive option, but it's not cheap. It's the cheapest option, but it's not cheap. So that's something that is also a concern. You know, you could possibly use that slab for some play activity or something, or maybe the whole slab comes out. So I haven't really tried to I haven't really thought too much about that in this option, but I think in this case, what's that?
It's still sloped too.
It still
So you'd have
slopes,
to, like,
and
break it all
the
up.
restroom area is all sloped,
Yeah.
right, to drain, so it's got curbs in there and stuff, so that's somewhat of a challenge. What this option does is it's the least expensive way to avoid the potential hazards of a building that will continue to decay and is unsafe.
And when you're saying filling it in, like, do we have to remove, like, I would think since it's sloped like that and it is, you just punch holes in the existing concrete and fill it and cover it? Or do you have to remove all the concrete?
We don't. I got another project where we're having this conversation. It's got a basement, concrete basement, and so we've taken the basement out and we're taking the walls out. And the decision was that in that particular case, that's not an area on site that will probably ever have a building. So we're not too concerned about what's down there.
Yeah.
If it's an area where you might have a building in the future, which I think
Yeah.
more reasonable here, then that's a concern, because then you're deferring some significant expenses to a future board by doing that. There's one of the high schools in Corvallis, original building, two-story building, and they just filled in the basement years ago, and it's just too expensive to try and address that to put a building. So for 30 years now, the campus design has been kind of worked around this crappy basement that's just too expensive to deal with when they could have just taken it out in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about as
Well, and
long-term
also, I'm just thinking,
implications.
if you remove the roof and everything, and you have all that sloping concrete, water, like when it rains, like.
I think the slab itself is, probably can come out, that's a relatively easy. The pool itself, the pool body itself is what I'm referring to. And that's the reason why those holes were poked in there. The drainage from the hillside was backing up, and we were able to fix that in the 2017 improvements. But there was a period, there was a winter, you may remember, where the pool started popping back out,
Yeah.
out of the ground because of that. And so holes were popped in to alleviate the upward pressure on the pool basin. So there's another way to think about this, and that is there a way to use the restroom area of the building, or the locker restroom area of the building? It's got plumbing, you know, it's short, it's a shorter building, to be able to support some other activity. And so the idea here is that corner of the site, what if it was like a park? And what if that was like a park restroom? Well, is there some possibilities there? And could this get filled in a way, take the rest of the building out and fill that pool in, but maybe think about not as a future building area where the pool is, but maybe more of a park area? And started to think, you know, in that particular case, you know, maybe I've done some skateboard parks, and this pool is not the right shape for a skateboard park. But maybe it's something like a BMX area or something like that. So maybe not only do you fill it in, but you kind of redo that whole area, and you have some kind of a play activity area, and that restroom area is repurposed to be something. You know, not inexpensive, because, you know, those showers and, you know, the sloping surfaces and all that stuff in the restrooms are still have to be addressed. But there's some building there that could get used. So I think there's a hybrid of how to use that. So, and you know, again, I think because of where it sits on site, it could be something like a community use that could be functioned independently during the regular weekday for the rest of the elementary school, and be, you know, it can be compatible with campus.
Yeah, that's creative. I had never thought of that. That's something to think about.
When Hurt and I met, that came up, and I'd just gotten back from my road trip in Auburn, California. They have like a regional park that had this huge, I guess BMX park or something, and there were tons of kids and community members out riding their bikes through it and stuff, and I was like, so.
Well, and it's also that adjacent field space too.
Right.
It's
Right.
totally underutilized right
Right.
now. We get a lot of calls about things that could go and should go into that space, so it would bring kind of a community focus to that area to say what else could populate in that area.
When you were showing the existing old building, oh man, I got so nostalgic.
You can feel the
I
whole
just
room.
saw myself on the high dive. I remember being on the high dive. I remember, so, you know, there's still that, we're realists. We know that this is, I mean, we've been trying actually for a number of years to reimagine what this would be. But just acknowledging the connection that some of us have with that, the history of that building.
Right.
And the closest to it then is making it some other cool use
Totally
space
true.
like that, you know,
Absolutely.
like for,
Yeah, and the idea of keeping some of the building, it may not be where the cool glue lamps are, and, you know, those
Right.
But I mean, you have plumbing and all that stuff there, so you hate to lose it, so.
Right, right, there's, you know, so it seems like there's the three options here are redo the building, but fill in the pool for some other use, take it all down, or utilize some of it. And I think that's the question. Actually, I think that's the next steps here for the conversation, or the next activities. The design team needs to complete the facility assessment, with the exception of some questions about broadband service and those kinds of things. We really don't need any more input from the district or from the board in terms of filling out those forms, and they just need to get filled out. The seismic, I want to come back to the seismic study here and talk about that a little bit more. What I mean by that, the asbestos testing will be done. So what that basically entails is PBS Environmental in Eugene is doing the work. They will take physical samples from a variety of, they will literally cut holes in the wall, cut holes in the floor, and then get lab tests to determine the amount of asbestos that's in there and whether it's contained or it's friable. Friable means that it, basically it's loose in the air. Most is friable insulation, or in here, or friable asbestos in school buildings was taken out in the late 80s and early 90s. There's a little bit in the attic, but what we're more concerned about is asbestos that's contained in materials. It's safe, except if you're gonna go in and cut that, trench through the floor, then you release that asbestos. So asbestos is more of a concern when you do improvements and, for the construction activities, and the needs to come out at that time. So the asbestos work will, do the field test, lab sampling, provide a report, and then you can, from that, a plan can get developed as to how to deal with those things. I think another step is if any of these design options you want to talk about more and either pursue them from a design strategy or an implementation and budgeting strategy. That's a conversation that can take place. And with that, I think it needs to start talking about what is funding strategies, what might they look like, and I think this idea of doing something with the pool, with something park-like, maybe there's opportunities for grant funding that might, community development funding that might not be available otherwise to the district for more academic purposes. So there's probably a good conversation about funding trends could take place. So let me delve into this seismic study a little bit. We have the grant was written, I think, for the industrial arts building and for the middle school building to do a seismic analysis. Again, those analyses are necessary to apply for a seismic rehabilitation grant. We actually did an analysis of the industrial arts building in 2016 and didn't apply because we knew it wasn't gonna, score high enough, and so we didn't spend the time on it. The standards are there's some minor tweaks to it, but so the question is how far. I mean, really, from a structural engineer's perspective, they're either do the analysis completely as needed for a grant application, or they don't really do anything. And we have the funding. We can't use it for anything else. But I don't know that it's going to make sense for the district to apply for a grant, because I don't think that the likelihood is very high. And so...
Because we're a small district?
No, because of the use of the buildings. This is the issue of, because it doesn't have a gym. Essentially, the gym is it's used during the school day. It's used in the evening. It's
You're
got...
talking about the middle school.
I know, that's what I'm saying, that basically schools with gyms get funded for the grants.
For us, yeah.
Right.
And that's why both the elementary school and the high school were able to get seismic grants, because they had gyms. The
Okay.
middle school just doesn't have that element that's gonna get used a lot.
Gotcha.
And so, the study can get done and use the grant, and we can, and I'm certainly saying, it's services that the engineer can use, and that's great for them. Just not 100% convinced that it's really useful for you with that information. And we know those buildings need to be upgraded a little bit. But I haven't pulled the trigger on those services just because I'm not sure that it's, I'm not sure it's the best use of the money, even though you can't use it for anything else.
Is it we've tried to think of all the creative ways that we may be able to use that building more, or, have it be, how to qualify. And then we'll have a gym. So, but the weight room used to be in there, if it was used for student access, more of the time, would that change anything?
You know, the reason why a gym is the one that kind of will make most spaces qualify is that they're used during the day for PE class, they're used in the evening for community activities, and then you have a game, a basketball game or a volleyball game where you get, 100 people or whatever. And so unfortunately, there's a lot of opportunities for people to die. That's what this is about, right?
Yeah.
And that's how that, it's a tough way to look at it. You say, darn, there's not enough people who are gonna die. Well, that's a good thing, right? It's a strange way to look at it. So, I'm not saying, tell me not to do this, but I'll talk to the structure a little bit more and just make sure that it makes some sense
Yeah,
before
is
we
it
go
gonna
into
do
it
any
further.
good
Yeah.
if we do it? Does a school-based health center, increase the need, like, do they have,
I don't think so.
okay, they have certain, like, code
There's also-
requirements, but I don't think seismic is really one of them.
Let me
so.
look into that a little bit and get back. I think the question is also how much it's used for a school, for academic purpose, or for school, traditional school purposes, not just owned by a school district,
Yeah.
is part of that as well. So anyway, sorry.
Well, I'm just thinking, like, the use will go up, but I think the spaces where we can make an argument that it's gonna be higher use are ideally a health center, community gathering space, if we are able to do the kitchen and host events in there, and then, the weight room idea, if we do music, we have a music design room, it would make sense to put a weight room back. That building, it's gotta go somewhere, right? And so there are, if we take that concept of I have no sense of direction, somebody point to the pool.
That one.
The pool being a community park, and then this being a community center, right? With school use too, does that now make it
Yeah.
a high enough use to say, actually, it should be seismically,
Yeah.
because you're gonna have people in there all the time, and
Right.
people
And
of all
people
ages,
using
0
it
to
during the
100.
school day, like if the
Yeah.
weight room's in there, that's a class.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
there's a kitchen in there, there's farm to table, culinary, those are
Yeah.
classes.
Yeah.
And so, but we can't use that space now without those upgrades, so I guess that's, if we can apply for that grant, saying that's what we'll use it for, would that make a difference?
I'll look into that. I had on a somewhat different context, I checked in with the organization, or the entity, Business Oregon, that issues the seismic rehabilitation grant. And this was about renovating a building to become a police station. And the grant program has a public safety side and a public school side. And they said, in that case, you can't use the grant. The grant is intended for existing buildings that are serving those functions. It's intended for an existing police station to renovate it. It's not intended for an existing building to become a police station. So that's different than saying a building that's basically a community use building expanding its use.
Yeah.
Could be different. So let me look into this a little bit more and get around this. This is a good way to think
Right.
about it. I
The
like
fact
that.
that it is a school building that was meant for school use, and the reason we don't use it is because we can't use it as that anymore. But if we could upgrade it, we would, like, because we're not trying to turn it, we're almost turning it back into.
Right.
And if it has the things we're talking about, we will utilize it, and community
And then
partners will use it, right? Like,
Exactly.
we want it used a lot.
Well, I think what this is also just reinforcing, the way, the grant application, there's multiple components to this analysis of the grant application. There's a seismic and structural analysis, but there's also a spreadsheet that talks about its use and activities, and that's how that score is determined. So it makes sense to get far enough along to see if we
To
can
do that
figure out a
side,
way
Yeah.
to improve that score.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm answering the question that way.
Yeah.
We need to do that.
Well, and I think sometimes, I don't know the specific requirements for grants. I know, like, these end up prerequisite for other grant funding, and I don't know if it's only seismic. So if we have that, and we wanna go after some, like a federal brick grant that does something on the building, and they're like, well, you have to prove seismic. I would like to have it in our back pocket to be like, we
Yeah, I
and
think
be
so.
able to put it into any of those grants.
Okay, well, I'll get them going on the middle school and get that going. And get it up to the same level of what we did, earlier for the industrial arts building and just keep moving.
I mean,
Talk
the
about
other
that.
reason is that the tenants would like to know how bad it is for them.
On behalf of the tenants.
Do you really?
People who spend hours
It
in that
is
building.
it is a one-story wood frame building, so it's inherently pretty flexible.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
It's not brick in areas and, where there is some concrete, it's at the other end where it's occupied now. So I'm not too concerned about it from that perspective, but it's certainly not it gets some information, so. Okay, we'll keep that moving forward. I will, Jared has the, this PDF, I'm looking at his computer, in terms of those design options, and I'm not asking you to make any, selection on any of these strategies, but I do think it's worth thinking about ways of improving the building.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a great presentation, thank you.
I mean, it's wonderful that we're actually having the conversation, because some of us feel that we've been sort of stuck. I mean, we've been stuck. And here we are, we've got forward movement, at least in our brains. We're not breaking ground anywhere, but
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I like also that we're looking at like the grandstand and
Yeah.
other campus spaces that are really great, they're valuable to the district that we haven't really focused on yet.
The industrial arts one, I think it doesn't have steps, it's already accessible. The adding those walls is relatively modest, and it provides you some flexibility that you don't have now in terms of it being able to use it for multiple
It's like the low-hanging fruit
things.
of this.
I think, yes,
The
it
first
is.
time I saw it, I thought the same thing. So two things just to jump in terms of that first and second, I think the second one with the larger design space and the smaller classroom, just in terms of how the space is being currently utilized I'd wanna go bounce that off other people, but based on what I know so far, that one I think is
Kinda
much more
seems-
appealing.
I don't know,
Yeah.
structurally, you haven't run the numbers, but it seems like it might be
That's what
more
I thought.
affordable.
I was gonna ask
Because you're
that.
not changing the wall structure as much as
Yeah.
in the first picture, but.
I assume that the door is the expensive part on that one, is that the one where we're?
In that area, there might be some concrete to take out there, this is all retaining wall,
Right.
but maybe not.
Yeah.
I looked at this pretty quickly, but I think that they're not fundamentally, it's adding a door and not reusing the door. So that's really the cost difference there, is just adding an exterior door.
Right. And I think also like that, we have a lot of smaller rooms in the district for different things.
Yeah.
But we don't have big spaces
Right.
like that and having
Right.
as many big spaces.
Yeah.
And so having a big space, I like that.
Yeah.
When you were talking about asking other people, Sue, you mean like our staff who would be in that
Use
space?
it,
Yeah.
and
Right.
all of that, right, but knowing what the conversations I've had with them so far and those kind of things,
Sure.
that, this one is way more appealing based on what I know so far. Just in terms of, what's the square footage of this room, if you had to guess?
This is, it's 870, something like that.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not
Then
quite
that's
900
way
square
better.
feet.
Mhm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was just trying to picture how small that 270 is,
Office.
for use, but.
This is a-
Yeah, I think it worked well.
Yeah.
This is, I want to say this is 11 by, what's 270 divided by 11?
Not quite
11.3, I think it
Yeah.
was, so it's, a little less than 20, around 20 feet in length. So it's probably not too different than where your office is and the office next to it. It's kind of those two sizes
That's helpful
together. It's
for-
kind of
okay.
two offices.
Yeah, that way
in
when
this
I
sense.
bounce
That's
off
why I
the
actually
lamps,
put the
they
two
can point
doors
to.
there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some small study areas, there's a lot of ways that can get used to support, more, older students who may be a little bit more independent, those kind of things, so. Thinking about that.
Okay, can we,
Yes, but can I just one really dumb question? The track building up at the top, we didn't look at that as part of this.
It's in
Like the
pristine shape.
gazebo building.
It's right, that's what I thought, okay, great, done.
The track's in wonderful shape.
It's in pristine.
The
Yeah,
track looks
yeah.
nice.
The
That
track was
only
We
re-
don't, I don't
yeah.
wanna discuss it necessarily, because I know we need to move on, but I just wanted to like ask, like, as a district, even if it's not part of this thing, is it something that we could, can include in our thinking about?
Yeah, the track shed
Yes.
concession area.
Yeah,
I mean, I have no problem when I come next time, taking a look at it and just giving my thoughts on that as well.
yeah.
I just haven't looked at it.
That's not that open one, seeing
The-
closed one you're talking about.
Well,
right?
the enclosed, not the
Not the
timing,
little gazebo,
not the timing
yeah.
gazebo, but like the actual shit, like, building there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
well, Kurt, thank you so much for your
Yeah.
time and for your wise counsel.
Thank
We'll-
you.
We'll continue to have questions, and we have a lot of work and decisions to make and
Yeah.
priority lists
Yeah.
to compile. But this is exciting,
Yeah.
super exciting.
Yeah.
Well, it's quite a joy to be involved again, and it's really nice to meet the new board. Congratulations, by the way. Real new board member, new to me for the rest of you, but
Yeah.
thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thank you,
Okay.
Kurt.
Bye.
Be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt.
Pardon my bad manners, but we do have a celebrity in the audience. Kay Graham is here, anywhere, right there. And really welcome. It's so exciting to have you back here on
It's
campus.
been really joyful to be here for the last couple of weeks.
Wow.
And I have to tell you, this school just looks fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause in my mind, I actually came in the spring for, was that
Sforza?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And just to visit, just to see how things were, here, and
Was the
I was
recruiting
blown
tour.
away, by the change that has happened here. So kudos to you guys for, this is one of the best looking, if not the best looking small school definitely in Lane County, but probably in Oregon, so.
Should have said that while Kurt was in here.
Yeah. And it just, and the feel of it is just, just feels good here, and so kudos to you guys for
well,
your
and
hard work.
to our community, because
Yes.
when we went out for the vote, there were 3 other districts that were, I can't remember, it was Junction City and somewhere else. We passed our levy by a much broader margin, so we really had the community support.
That's great.
It really meant a lot.
So
Exciting.
it's beautiful here.
Yay, we think so too, I know. All our kids and the former students are like, I want to go back to school. School's cool. All right.
And I do want to say one more thing, you made a tremendous hire with Sue, so.
I made a tremendous
Thank you.
hire.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Forward, right? We're moving forward. Okay, district reports, the middle school and high school report. I guess you're going to give all 3 reports, aren't you?
I am, and I was trying to sneak a picture in, but I'm not gonna be fast enough, so I'll just tell you, the industrial arts building, the 2 ends of it are painted. We still need to do the trim, but
Yeah.
even those pictures are old, and it looks fresh and newer. So, and thank you to Craig Putnam and students who helped him with taking care of that, so.
Thank you, Craig.
I'm gonna go on there. It is presentation night on this this thing, sorry, but if you wanna stretch, I recommend standing, and I'll talk as fast as I can. That's not what I wanna do though. How do I remind some buttons I push?
Maybe change it to the closed building might help. It's a new one. I like
It's different on every.
Jerry just to
I
be
think-
creative
yeah,
every time.
Yeah.
What did he call it this time?
The closed building.
Every time I get the thing, I'm like, ooh, what's it gonna be?
Fantastic.
All right, slideshow. All right, so, quick kind of year in review and looking forward for this school year. And I'll go through as quick as I can here, reviewing the goals from beginning of year that I kind of set and shared to the board around attendance. I had categorized them as attendance, safety, and engagement, and then I added a piece on partnerships and grants. And I'm realizing I forgot the slide with all the staff and what they do, dang it. But I will send that, I promise. That's the only data slide, so let your eyes adjust here. But at the beginning of the year, if you recall, I talked about attendance. Just as a reminder, the one that gets reported on the state report card is K2 regular attenders, and we were at 26% and regular attender is this column that's 90% and above. And if you don't go to school 90% of the time, or more than 90% of the time, then you are considered chronically absent. Whether that's 89% or 29%, you are chronically absent in terms of the state, the way they count it. And the average for K2 last year, I'm making this up, but it was like 64%, somewhere in the 60s, I can't remember the exact number. So kind of increasingly through the year, we got more and more attuned to attendance and communication, especially at the middle school, high school, and kudos to Joy for leading those efforts. And that is, remains a goal and will be a goal going into this year. When I presented this at the beginning of last year, I said, hey, I'm guessing on this because I don't know where we're gonna be post-COVID, all the things. So now we have a good baseline number. So I said, hey, our goal is to get to 75% of students attending school regularly, which is the more than 90% of the time, and then regular daily attendance at 90%. I don't have that data. We just worked to make that report easier to run each day, but we posted, Carrie Dean has moved from the elementary up to here and is gonna take on attendance reporting for both schools and kind of become our attendance czar. And even today in our coaches meeting, we've shifted our policy for sports that you need to be there the day before and the day of sports in order to be eligible to play. Other districts in our region have implemented that policy with really high success. And there was, actually at one point, coaches were like, and the day after, and then we kind of talked ourselves back a little bit, so. Anything else on attendance?
Those are unexcused absences.
Yeah, we talked about not prearranged.
Right,
So, because we still have issues with excused absences, but we talked about prearranged. Yeah, we took that into account, and we'll get that communicated out, but yes. And it'll be updated in the coaching handbooks. Which I think you're doing that right. Somebody's doing that from that meeting. It wasn't me.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do educators like that rubric that the state came up with? Do they think this is useful?
Like the definition
Yeah.
of attendance?
Yeah.
I know we like our kids at school.
For sure.
Hey, Crystal, I did see that question come in, and I can call you tomorrow and talk through it. And the answer is I don't think so, but there are some things off that. But I'll call you tomorrow.
We didn't eat before, so.
I get it. Sorry, these go so long.
I mean, it sounds like an odd way to collect data, that it's 90%, you have to be here 20. I didn't really even understand.
Well, so I said this. I just said I want to get this number to 75%, and I don't know if that's going to take us 1 year or 2 years. I think we can do it by next year. That's my thing. This definition is the only one that's a state-defined thing, and it's based off research that says if you come to school, you learn. And so for us,
Research.
it turns out we're common sense, right?
Is it related to federal stuff at all?
Different states have the ability to define that differently, but in general, it's defined pretty similar. Whether it should be at the 90% mark or the 85% mark or the 80% mark, that's the reason this was one for my own interest and working with kids who were already in the 60s. I was talking to them about getting to 80% and watching our numbers. And so I can't remember remember who's the biggest example of this, but here we go. Third grade, only, less than half of them are at 90% or more, but almost all of them are at 80. That means we can make this jump to 90 by next year, right? At that grade, well, they'll be in fourth grade, but at that grade level. So when I look at these, I feel really confident that with some really intentional focus on attendance, we're gonna be up in the 90s, right, for a lot of these students. This is harder. These are patterns that have developed over all these years, which is why we want to really build those habits early. And this was with a ton of effort, right, to get to these levels. But we've set that culture now, and I think that expectation, and they're talking about it and those kind of things, I expect that to jump as well.
Well, and Joy and you had that effort be student-led, and that was
We're trying. So
I mean,
yeah, and and
good
this
peer pressure is good peer pressure. When kids are saying, "Why aren't you here?
here
Get
at
your butt
school,
here."
yeah, and they're calling each other,
Yeah.
they're knocking on doors, they're texting. In ninth grade, I always shout, and actually seventh is hiding down here, but seventh and ninth grade, they come to school a lot. And this data, if you compare it to the last thing I shared out, this is every kid who attended school. What did I do? We had maybe 6 kids total in this that attended here for less than 2 months, and I took them out of the data because a lot of them attended for 2 months, but we saw them for less than a month, and so we knew they were attendance, and we tried things, but we never got to impact, and so I might have cheated a little bit and pulled them out. But I had a 2-month mark on there. It was actually if they weren't here till the end of October, blah blah blah. But this is almost all of our students that we had last year, including kids who weren't enrolled here at the end of the year. And I will say, very, very noticeable that the kids that didn't stay enrolled had low attendance from the beginning. And so us knowing that means day one, when we notice a pattern, 2-3 absences at the beginning, we need to be at the house saying hi, making that relationship, saying we want to keep you here in our community. What do you need in order to be at school? So, yeah.
Cool, thanks.
So this, I had called it safety. A lot of it, in all honesty, turned to documentation in general for things to do with safety. And then there's kind of 2 parts of safety, both like the training policies, practices, procedures, or that's not what I'm gonna say, sorry. The 2 parts of safety being both safety and belonging. So there's a little more on this slide, but the Addie's Act is the Suicide Prevention, Intervention, and Postvention Plan. It's like 52 pages, tons of resources that we use in it. We'll train at the beginning of the year on this. It is done, submitted, live on our website if you wanna look at it. The emergency I can't say the word, preparedness, we trained at the beginning of the year, did a lot more of those drills than were being done prior. I probably am a couple short for the year, but pretty darn close to doing all of them. And have those plans in place. The piece that still needs to be finalized is putting all of that documentation into reality there. There's a hard copy that exists from 10, 12 years ago that I want to move to electronic and update, but it's this big. Anyway, so it's the documentation piece, and I've told the state we're going to finish that by December, I think. These pieces I'll talk about, we're attending to these things, but we're not meeting the requirements yet, and that was part of the Division 22 plan, and I have another slide on that. Just a couple other highlights. We implemented the houses and clubs, and are systematizing those even further into morning routines, and I say routines, morning meetings, the success classes, all of those pieces that have been kind of discrete are moving together, and more coordinated up at the middle school, high school. At the elementary this year, one of the number one goals is morning circles and connection routines that build that community and class culture. That's happening in many spaces. The goal is that it's every single space, every single day.
And so like, where do you think the goal is gonna be realized? When will
This
we
year,
be-
oh, yeah, like
Okay,
day one.
okay.
Yeah, we're on plan to make that, we're supporting it. It's the, one of the top 3 goals this year,
Cool.
so. And then we did host those 2 full PD days that were kind of intended to build that culture and connection, and to your point of bringing youth into the solution and planning of the school, so.
I kind of had a thought
Yeah.
about the emergency preparedness, the lockdown. So even after that whole thing, I feel like as a parent, I was like, God, I wouldn't know how to reinforce at home, especially for younger kids, what to do. So I
Yeah,
think parents
that's
maybe
good
need
feedback.
to
Yeah.
know what at least some sort of policy is, what the kids are supposed to be doing. That way at home I can say like,
Yeah.
what do we do if this happens? Because
So-
I'm like coming up with my own, like go in the bathroom and hide by the toilet, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
I'm
and-
coming up with my own, and I think parents would benefit from knowing.
Talking about that in both spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah, so to that, it's a great point. I think that takes it a step further than I'm planning for right now, so I'll add that in. The new Parent Square app has like a library of notices that, like, so on drill, so like y'all have never known when we have a drill, right? Well, the real drill. Then it became like, oh, whoa, are we even prepared for this? So we'll have drill language, and we'll practice those communications, especially on lockdown drills, but it'll be very clear that this is a drill. We're practicing our communication systems in the case that this was real, but this is a drill. Here's da-da-da-da, and I think we can add a piece to that of, hey, they talked about or this happened at school today, here are some things you can talk about with your students tonight, and we can have those kind of, the 2 systems are elementary and high school, so we can have an elementary version and a high school version that is more age appropriate. So yeah, I'll add that into there. Yeah, great. Any other on that one? And then this one was community engagement overall with these 3 parts: engaging students, staff, families, and community partners in development of the integrated plan that was submitted to the state. I might have been committed afterwards, yeah, submitted. Our commitment to the community. And that was done, and it is kind of still bringing all those funding resources together into those priorities, and was done in development together. The portrait of a Mapleton graduate, I think I've shared with a number of you that didn't get as far as I wish on that. However, this summer we had a group come in and look at that data, and we have a draft, and that's going to go out to community pretty quick, but it needs to get processed with staff first, and so with all staff, and so the kickoff day of in-service, the draft will go live to staff for the first time, and then based on that input, we'll come to the community pretty quick. And I'm freaking excited about it. I love it. So I'm very open to changes in it, but I think they landed it in a really cool place. So stay tuned. And then this last piece of visioning and action towards a rural community school model, and I think you're hearing some of that in even the way we're talking about facilities, but I have another slide somewhere. Just some of the programs and grants that we've been able to get, and the way these programs are kind of building towards that vision. So the Mapleton Community Preschool got sustained funding through Preschool Promise, and so I have the amounts for each of these on here. I'm not going to read all that, but I did add some updates from the summer, things that have happened. So we hired Natalie Ross as the lead teacher, and also Haley Shrinky and Sean Walker as assistants. And then we did put a investment into some student-centered play-based curricular materials that have been highly recommended, and Natalie and I kind of looked through and have those. They're sitting in the hallway down here, plus there's online access for her to support her planning, and we're excited we just got those. And then I just met yesterday with United Way, Chris Coombs, I think how you say her name, and there's a budget plan. It sounds like if you fill it out, you get it, but it might be a grant application for Family Resource Support Center for 0 to 6-year-olds. And my thought is right now, but we'll process this further, but the area on the end of the preschool that turned into the Napateria, to do some further modification, perhaps there, I think it makes sense there for like a family resource center, and kids younger than preschool being able to come in and do some play in that area too. So that we may decide that space doesn't make sense and somewhere else does, but right now that's what I'm thinking about based on yesterday. Gear Up, we got the Gear Up grant, $75,000 a year for 5 years. Kay is the main lead on that and is doing I can't say that in a board meeting. Doing a phenomenal job. I was going to say kick-ass, my bad. I said it.
Does that mean we have a commitment for 5 years from you? That's exciting.
Nice job, Michelle.
Keep moving there, Sue, with your thought.
We got it. And Europe, we've talked about sports small rural districts, building a college-going culture that supports all students for post-secondary success. College-going being defined really, really broadly and openly, which I really appreciate. This summer, we did take 18 students, 8 middle schoolers, 10 high schoolers, to a week-long camp at Western Oregon University, and they engaged in, I'll call it leadership programming for lack of a better description, but I thought it was really cool. And Kay came and we chaperoned together with Haley Strinky and Jeff Bernhardt, and it was really fun to watch the kids engage on a college campus with each other. We saw growth in a lot of the kids over the week. It was really fun. So, and then we are currently writing the plan. I say we, Kay's doing this. To upgrade these 3 spaces that will be the College and Career Center, our computer lab. We're going to make into a more modernized tech space, including like screen, or that's not what I'm trying to say, video production, podcasting, lots of software to support more like publication and production, computer engineering, CAD, and sound mixing. Anyway, some of that stuff. We had a cool meeting the other day with tons of ideas.
Do we have a relationship with the public radio?
Not yet. They're on my list. I met them at a Siuslaw Vision thing last year and said, hey, you want to put an antenna on our roof and we can broadcast to upriver, and our kids could do some radio shows. And they said yes. But saying yes in a meeting like that is probably different than for real. So that'll be on the list for this year. And then the district office space by Jaren's office, we are turning into a library and a secondary library and Zenden, for lack of a better word, and Kay and students have been designing that space.
Nice.
Stay tuned, because I think it's going to be really cool. Farm to Table, so that was a middle school program. All the high schoolers were like, what about us? So it has led to putting in a CTE program of study application. You have 3 years to kind of build out the program of study, but it opens up access for $20,000 for us to do some cool stuff with. So that class kind of ended up taking on 4 parts that were culinary and hospitality, gardening, business and marketing, and construction. And we're taking those 4 and expanding that into some project-based approaches within our school schedule. Stay tuned, I think it's going to be kind of cool.
Nizan and I were both kind of conniving over here when Kurt was talking about the play structure, you know, in that area, the old play structure. It's like, well, farming or something.
Yeah.
That's a big space down there.
Yeah, and well, and right now, I mean, there's a lot of action happening right now on the like lower field and play structure. We did build the greenhouse. Did I write that? This summer. And then end of last year, the middle schoolers visited the Florence Food Share food production garden, and then made designs for using our space for that, and there's lots of cool things happening in that direction. I met with OSU Extension yesterday, and they're hiring a Florence-based specialist coordinator. I didn't know what the actual title was. That'll be half-time 4-H and half-time SNAP Ed, and we'll be at Mapleton and Saisla. So
I don't know what SNAP Ed is.
so, the main curriculum that they use right now is Kids in the Kitchen, but it's working with students of all ages to do culinary and nutrition and those types of programs. So that'll increase our access to that type of programming both in the school day and on Friday, like Friday enrichment workshops. So. And then Connected Lane County, quick update, and I'll send an email that I just got, I think yesterday, from the community kitchen conversation. Long story short, so I think I told you guys, like, hey, Connected Lane County is a really trusted partner. Graham, we don't know as much, but I feel comfortable with this because they're partnered. I think there was a little bit of difference, and I don't want to speak on behalf of either one of them, but that kind of summary is, I think Connected Lake County really wanted school-based, and Graham really wanted restaurant experience, and at some point they decided they're going two different directions, and so Graham is partnered, he just emailed me yesterday that he's partnered with the Boys and Girls Club of Western Lane County, is that what they're called? And they put in a grant that they're waiting to hear on, that will allow them to go into a restaurant. I've heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, that it's a restaurant on the, is it north or south? South side of the bridge from Florence. But I don't know much more than that.
They're putting a new one.
That was closed.
Oh, that's outside.
Yeah.
If that one closed, if that was the only one I could.
They are doing something in that building though.
That Morgan's Kitchen one.
So,
So, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Pierre Point Inn.
Yeah, there's no Pier Point Inn,
And,
but.
and the email
it's gonna
said
get
one of,
farther.
I should reread it before I say this, but I think it said like one of 3 spots that they're pursuing, so they may not even have that nailed down, so,
Was he transparent with you when he first approached you? Because it sounded like he wanted us.
I felt that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do, I mean, there was definitely restaurant connections. I connected him with a couple of different, like Teresa, at the casino about different, options there. So things, sometimes you're trying to move something and you say a lot of things and
Yeah,
try to
sure.
find what lands, and it wasn't here. But I think so I'm still talking to Connected Lane County a lot about this. What we don't want to do is produce 2 of the same thing in the same region, so we'll be careful on how we proceed, and once the asbestos is taken care of, we'll be able to move a little faster. And they actually purchased a food truck that is parked out at Springfield High School right now that I was like, so we get to use that when we have an idea, right? And the answer was yes. So stay tuned. Any questions on that? I was just gonna go to good on that. Okay. And then this concept of Upriver Vision Team, so together with the Saisla Watershed Council and Saisla Vision and other partners, we submitted and got the community transformation grant from United Way. We have interviews tomorrow morning for that community coordinator position, and then that'll help us move efforts to connect kind of the out-of-school programming and the in-school programming around all these different initiatives. And the vision and commitment to that is that it's student, every single component of that is student-led and student students leading alongside adults, co-leading and involved in the governance throughout. So I did submit on August 8th for the full service community school federal grant. It's $1.5 million, I think, that I put at 1.4 that we submitted for a 5-year grant. That's the one I wanted my whole life, so we'll find out in October. And worst case, we get feedback and do it again, but I'm gonna get that grant, I don't care what. And that one is in partnership with like 7 different organizations, most closely the Federated Tribes of Coastal Arapaho and Saves and Indians. So, and then we did in consortia with like 5 districts through the ESD. We applied for the 21st Century After School Program grant. And we were supposed to hear in July, and then we got an email that says we got a lot of them. Stay tuned in August. And I looked this morning and I hadn't seen anything, so we might get some funding for after school program. This is just, I probably won't jump into all these, but Division 22, we submitted early in the, I don't know, November or something, and this is just an update. All the green ones, we are now in compliance and have updated the state and they said you're good. The yellow ones are things that we're like in the process of doing right now. This one is just in our literacy plan scope and sequence, we'll align the media, I'm gonna say media standards. They're called something else too, but that's like a documentation thing that we're working on. Health services, that emergency plan that will get all written out and done. There's a piece on like medications and something else that needs to go in that, and so that'll happen, I think I said by December. And then this, we're just waiting for the ESD to host this training, and at least Jocelyn will attend it as soon as, that's what we said in the plan. More people can attend, but as long as she does, we'll be in compliance, and it just wasn't offered last year, and so as soon as it's offered, I'm already in touch with the ESD to say, I absolutely need you to host this for us, so.
Why is that only dyslexia? Like, why not dysgraphia or any of the other, like?
It might be inclusive there, but because the groups supporting dyslexia have the best lobbyists, is the short answer to that.
It's just weird, because there's like a lot of other.
Yeah, and I think the trainings end up inclusive of some of those things, but it really is like the kind of, I feel like some of it was the science of reading folks and the dyslexia like advocates kind of figured out legislation through there. So I'm not trying to minimize it, but that's why. So, and then these two, I just want to be really honest. Health, the health, what's the word I want? Curriculum adoption isn't till like 2025 on the 7-year cycle. And to me, like we're doing a lot, right? This makes the most sense to do in that process. And I feel like I was pretty straightforward with the state to say, hey, we're taking care of lots of things. We're going as fast as we can. Some of these are gonna have to be on the back burner. And I thought it made the most sense because we can do it at the same time as the health adoption. I gave them an update. They wrote back and said, yes, and you really only get a year. And I wrote back and said, so what if I tell you a year and then ask you for longer? And they can't say yes to that. But they wrote back and said, it needs to be before the start of 24, 25. And I said, okay, we'll do it this summer. I don't know if we're gonna get to it or not. We got a lot going on. They did offer me.
Does that mean you haven't submitted what they want, but we are addressing these issues in school?
Well, so we do components of all these, and when I went through the Division 22, I think I shared back then, like, right, we had said we're in compliance on all these things. A lot of districts say they're in compliance on all these things, but when you look closely at it, it's the documented plans, like, right, at a leadership changeover, you should be able to say, okay, where's that plan? And if you're in compliance, you should be able to open it and read it, right? And we don't have those things in place, and so I thought it was a spot to say, well, I'm not gonna say we have it, I can't find it, right? And so, and then put that on the list of things we need to do. I'm still gonna be honest and say, no, we didn't get to it, we did all this stuff, and if they, you know, they've been really supportive, but they also have to hold their timelines and the communications, so I'd like to get to that this spring and summer. They did offer like, hey, you can do a curriculum adoption through a different process instead of waiting for that cycle. The thing is, like, I don't know if I wanna do that yet.
Okay,
So,
but my direct question is, we are teaching human sexuality. It's in-
we
in our
teach
curriculum.
health, yeah, health and human sexuality, where, although that is, of all the things that should exist in writing, that's the one that
Yes.
should be processed with the community the
Yeah.
closest and most robustly, which is why I don't wanna rush it.
Right.
And so, and I don't wanna do it separate from buying materials, because they should all match, right? And so, things like, that's so that human sexuality education is so comprehensive of a plan that, are we doing it fully? No. Are we doing lots of areas of that? Absolutely. And so we'll keep bettering ourselves in what we're doing. I will say one of the areas we're working on is Aaron's Law, which is sexual violence prevention, and there's a requirement that 4 times a year across K-12 that there's some intentional curriculum experience, and we're working on that, and then Daniel supports districts at the ESD, he supports districts, and
When
so.
you talk about these things, like especially say the 2 that are still red,
Yeah,
is that K through 12?
both, so, yeah, so, I know human sexuality education is, that plan has to be comprehensive in K-12, and it's age appropriate, so like sometimes we hear the word sexuality and it's like, but there is a, age appropriateness embedded in that, which is why processing with the community is so important. And then the first one, drug and alcohol prevention, I don't remember off the top of my head what age group that starts at. K-12, so it's a part of the K-12 Comprehensive Health Education Program. Grades 9 through 12 shall receive age-appropriate instruction about drug and alcohol prevention, at least annually. So like figuring out a way, not every kid every year has health, so you have to figure out a way to do some component of that. And then, trying to see if they say, yeah, so it's your K-12 health education program, but it doesn't dictate where in their drug and alcohol is, yeah. I will say though, we were just in actually it was the coaches meeting, but conversation around vaping. And vaping and tobacco use, the research right now shows that that's actually impactful at like 4th and 5th grade. And if you wait longer than that, you're just talking at kids who are probably already using. So, well, or have made up their mind about whether they're gonna use or not. So, a lot of times, right, and our first education on that this last year is at 7th grade, and so we need to figure out where that's gonna happen in our curriculum, so. Sorry, I lost my, there we go. Are we good to jump forward? Okay. This was just things that I thought didn't make it on there, but kudos to y'all, and thank you for serving on those committees. New classified, certified, and, oh, messed that up.
Confidential.
Confidential is supposed to be right there, sorry. And confidential salary schedules. And then right now, we're in the process of making sure every position has a documented job description. Some people have one somewhere, so we're trying to get those all in the same spot. And then Friday school expansion. So this is happening, and a piece that's going to make that really possible is we will now have Brenda on campus for serving as administrator for Friday school, and so already a couple things in the plan to have, and those offerings will be K-12, which I'm excited about, so more enrichment opportunities. And then I think we talked enough about the TAP grant today, but moving on, facilities. Looking forward, so see some connections continue. I don't want to drop goals and get, I want to keep going where we're at. So attendance, belonging, and communication. And I talked a little bit about Parent Square, but hopefully y'all are experiencing that a little bit and seeing some of those communications coming out. And then soon we will have staff trained to use that, and teachers will be using that to communicate as well. Coaches, today we talked about using that as the primary or only communication tool as soon as they're trained.
Just really quick,
yeah.
like, I have really enjoyed getting the information that's come over that, and
Cool.
it's been like easy to receive. I get notifications, and that comes in various ways and stuff, so.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a fan of, and if you hear anybody that's like, I don't like it, ask them why and call me.
That's what I'm
Sometimes
curious
it's
about,
something.
because in the district I work in, people don't like
Yeah,
it,
and I
and so I'm
can't-
trying to figure out what they don't like, because
Yeah.
I haven't found it yet, but maybe when I go back to work, I'll hear about it.
Okay, yeah, so, and usually it's something that they can change in their notifications that then doesn't make it overwhelming. Because if you get it in 3 spots and it feels like we're talking to you all the time, I can
Sure.
see that it's overwhelming, but that's us helping them how to change the notifications. So I've been trying to share little snippets of that as,
Right.
and I'm like, kudos to the community, how many people have actually signed up for it and got the app and that kind of stuff, like it looks, it's,
I don't
I'm
have
excited.
that, I don't think I did that part, but I get the text and the
Yeah.
emails, right?
And you
So.
can go to it without, if you want to two-way communicate at all, you'll want to
Do
get
the
the app, because then you can, like, comment or,
Question
it's
back or
every,
something.
exactly,
Yeah, I found it's a little, like, not using the app, it organizationally doesn't work for me, like, it's hard for me to see the structure, yeah, but when in the app, I can see it better. And it makes more sense, like, what program is sending that to you, what part of the school and stuff like that.
yeah.
Cause then that could get confusing, where we're getting like coach, the coach things
Yeah.
and teacher things and then,
Like, what is
district
it
thing.
here? Yeah.
Was there a link sent or something about, like, to
And-
get?
And I think
We've
in the
sent
first
quite a few times, so I can invite through there and have been sending it out about weekly to register for it. If people aren't getting it, that means your information in our student system isn't totally accurate. I have had actually I was just texting with somebody who, we've had some things where like an emergency contact, somebody's supposed to be an emergency contact, but they're getting main
The stuff,
contact, so as we find those out, we're fixing them, so at registration, we'll be able to really hone in on that and help people get registered. And then there was something else and I'm totally forgetting. Yeah, anyway, I don't know what I was gonna say. I just to share real quick, so my husband is my test, like sometimes in education, just watching the way and one night I came home late and he wanted to go to dinner and he's all pissy and he's like, you're busy sending out these notifications, da 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 da. And I was like, I sent that at 10 this morning, but you have it on digest mode where you get all of them at 6 o'clock. And so he thought I took time to write this whole email to the district instead of coming to dinner. And I was like, don't get pissy on me, just eat. So,
You're hangry.
yes, that's what I told him, and he was nice after we ate. But there are choices on whether you get it right away or as a digest. So, in terms of teaching, so these are kind of district-wide goals, and they definitely match through here. Attendance should probably go down here too, because it's gonna be a focus on everything we're doing. But literacy implementation, cross K-12, if you look, this is new high school curriculum that is waiting for Garrett from Idaho. And there's if you want, I'll make sure this is shared out to y'all. There's a scope and sequence for K-8 filled out in here right now, and then we're working to add the 9-12, and that's where those media literacy standards will come and get added. Tier 1 routines and supports, and so that idea of like morning meetings and those kind of things are like a main part of that, but also as a whole district, That means I talked too long. This is the part where you tell me it's an ESD computer. And you gave me one, and it's in my backpack, and I haven't done it yet. Okay, I might just tell you, because I think that's the last slide. The tier, when I talk about, do you guys know what tier 1 means? Not for PERS, but for school. Tier 1 is like those supports and systems and routines in place that are intended to support every single kid to be successful. And when you're doing all of those well, usually you're gonna meet the needs of, like, they kind of use this model of like 85% of students are really well supported by that. And then probably 15% need tier 2 supports that you add something in. So that might be, around attendance, it might be the family that's like, hey, we all leave in the morning and the kid sleeps through the alarm clock. We need one more thing in place to get them here, would be a tier 2 support. And then your tier 3 is supposed to be less than 5% of students that need something really individualized, personalized, I don't want to use the word extreme, just something that the rest of what works for most students isn't meeting them. So really increasing that attention to tier 1 supports so that we have less kids needing those tier 2 and tier 3 things. And then the last one on there is formative and performance-based assessment, and the literacy initiative and assessment will kind of go hand in hand. But to the point of state testing, right, we've talked a lot. That's not the measure that is going to tell us about where our kids are on the day-to-day, and so ramping up our ability to say, what do we want students to know and be able to do, and do we know they can do it, and what do we do when they can't? So that's where we're at. And my computer is like frozen, so if I have another slide, I don't know, but I'll stop there. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Lots going on, lots to look forward to. Okay. Finance tech maintenance report documentation. What you got for us? Should I move again?
What level of,
Oh my God, is it
Detail.
another PowerPoint?
what level of detail do you want? I don't have a PowerPoint, but I can give lots of details, or I can give you the Google Earth.
You
Upper
paid
level.
bills and there was money and then you signed some checks.
I'm doing some tech stuff, and I'm paying some money, and we're receiving some.
You got us an owl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been sitting in my office for a while. I finally got it out today.
Yay, that's exciting. Does anybody have any questions for, it's 10 after 8. Does anybody have any questions for Sharon?
I just had a quick question when you're talking about the tech lab, kind of with all of those things. Is that going through tech? Like, where does that equipment come? Like, sound mixing software and hardware is not cheap.
No, so right now, so a lot of it's open source though. So we pulled folks together, and so some of it is like what hardware, what software, and there was this brainstorm of people who know some of this stuff to say, here's a ton of open source stuff, and then here's a set that's more expensive. And so we talked about, I got to pull my notes out because I don't know a lot of them, but we're kind of right at the take that brainstorm list and go look at cost association and get kind of the, okay, here's what we're purchasing, and then I'd be happy on that part to bounce the sound stuff off you. We had it was Heidi Sundstrom and Zach Burt come with the journalism and video production backgrounds, and then Stephanie Gahalva has a lot of the digital art, digital media components. I'm missing somebody. And Krissa has a lot of the engineering and CAD and computer science stuff, and so we had a brainstorm session to throw all those ideas around. So,
yeah, no, I was more asking like where is that equipment coming from and how are we paying
funding?
for it?
Oh yeah, Gear Up grant.
The
So
Gear Up
the
grant?
first year of Gear Up grant, like it started kind of mid-year last year.
Mhm.
We still got a full year of funding, and so
So you only have K for 4 years.
Yeah, sure, that's
Hush
true.
your mouth.
We'll find other funding. So that budget is what we're using to update
do,
those
okay.
spaces,
That-
not all of it.
that
but
answers
that's
the
where-
question.
yeah,
Perfect,
that's where
thank
it's gonna
you.
go. Yeah.
Oh, one tech thing that I'll bring up, since Sue mentioned her thing, talking about safety, and this could be a partial board, oh yeah, the board decision also, is I had brought up with her, as a matter of safety around campus, we used to get badges from the photo company and stuff. We're not using the photo company. But so well, I'm getting into all sorts of things today. So I worked on making some badges today to try it out. Actually broke out the stuff, try it out and scratch them, see how durable they are and stuff. But and the idea was that any adult that's on campus should be wearing a badge, and then a student knows they're supposed to be here. I mean, you have your staff that have their badges, and then plenty of visitor badges and stuff.
Oh,
But just as a matter of safety, so that then students, yes, can identify a little easier, they're supposed to be here. It's
so like Rolling Readers will have those badges.
Yeah,
Okay.
checking in at the office,
Uh-huh.
you can get a badge and those kind of things, so.
Uh-huh.
Fantastic.
We should talk, I mean, it makes sense for Watershed Council staff to have badges,
Yeah.
but we also get visitors that, when they need to check in at the office, right now, we don't have them check in at the office.
Or if there's a check-in process with you, I think it
You
would
could
work,
have
but
some. Yeah,
that's
we
where
have-
I think we
Yeah.
align those so that if an adult's on campus, and the idea of blue vests, I really liked before, if they're working out like on
Yeah.
the field or something, or in the back, but, yeah, I think let's
Yeah.
figure
That's
out,
fine.
I don't think they need to come to our office, but if
No.
you know they're your visitors and make sure they have a badge, I think that would be great.
And we used to do that actually with little clip-on things
Yeah.
too, so.
Yeah,
Great, awesome. So that'll be implemented this year.
but, yeah, got the thing to do it, what's that, whoever takes pictures for
Life
schools
Touch?
is
Life Touch.
ridiculous
Yeah.
in their costs, so we
Yeah,
said
they-
no and are gonna, one, we're doing the badging ourselves and bought the equipment for that, and two, we're, scheduling a local photographer to come do our pictures for us.
So because they don't do student body cards anymore,
Yeah, they're,
so.
and they
stinks,
charge you
yeah.
for, now they're charging for
$5 a kid if
a sitting fee.
yeah.
Yeah, we said, no thanks. So,
After they charge, they're gonna give you that, and then they're gonna charge for the packet.
Yeah.
They give you,
Yeah, you get nothing for the $5 per kid.
Oh.
And it's because nobody buys them, because you can, I mean, not nobody, but they're not making money, but that's their
Yeah.
fault, not mine.
Yeah.
So
So,
asking for more didn't really help, but.
yeah,
right.
us paying $5 a kid isn't gonna make them more money. I mean, it's just gonna give them more money. We can give it to somebody local, so.
Awesome. Okay, how about the consent agenda? We've got the payroll check register, accounts payable check register, and the prior month's minutes. And if there's no discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Unanimous, thank you very much. Now we're gonna elect a board chair and a vice chair. It's been tradition to just go with we usually do a 2-year. If you're satisfied with your board chair and your vice chair, I'm not gonna suggest, I'm just gonna say that.
So you told chair and vice chair another year? Is that
Well,
what you're saying?
if we are nominated and elected, then I probably would serve. Yeah.
Would you serve?
I'll have to.
And would you serve?
Sure.
Okay, then I nominate Michelle as chair and Andrea as vice chair for another year.
I second that nomination.
All right, moved and seconded, all those in favor? Unanimous.
Things simple.
Okay. All right, thank you,
Thank
Mary.
you for being willing to serve those.
Yes, thank you so much.
Sure.
And thank you for this last year.
Of course. And now we're going into personnel, hiring Brenda Moyer as our special programs director.
And Sean Walker.
Are we gonna do all of these
Yeah, they're,
together?
Yeah, I think we've been doing it.
Resignation first.
I think he's titling them all together, so we say it all in one.
Okay,
one
so
lump.
9.2, I need a motion.
I move, we approve the 9.2 2.1 and 9.22.
And Sean Walker.
Yeah, well, including the addition of Sean Walker that we, noted at the beginning.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor, raise your hand, unanimous, thank you very much. Confidential salary schedule approval, you all are on board with what happened with all of that, yes? I need a motion.
I move that we approve the 9.4
I
confidential salary.
I had one quick question though.
Mhm.
And so I was waiting to talk to Jaren, I want to remember how I was phrasing this yesterday. It was like with the benefits to that, right?
Yeah, so the EA position, or not, sorry, that's not what I'm trying to say either. The
Administrative.
administrative assistant positions, we got clarity on, we were using 2 or 3 different names for that. Administrative assistant position, and the relationship to the EA salary schedule, and essentially how was that position landed on the salary schedule?
The math or numbers of it based on that. Do you know a good explanation, Jaren? You've probably maybe kind of told us, but.
Yeah, just comparability to other districts
Okay.
and, yeah.
And so when you see like the -10, what does that mean?
So our classified make more salary because we don't give them benefits.
Okay.
And so, I mean, that's why they make as much as they do salary-wise.
And trying to get equivalent to bus drivers
Yeah.
in that too. Like some of that EA, so it's, yeah, that EA move was to get equivalent to bus drivers, and be competitive with other districts who do give a benefits package on that piece. And then,
The administrative assistants.
the math
get-
is tied, so we were
Right,
using
you do get
those
Yeah.
salary schedules as our initial starting point for those salary schedules, and all 3 of them flexed.
Because it's
right?
not that you're factoring the benefits as part of their salary.
No, it was,
Okay.
the initial math was, okay, let's use that to get a starting spot, so we took that and then put it onto the days that they work. And then from there did comps, Jared and I talked about this morning, sorry I'm speaking for you. From there we did comps with all the districts, they shared numbers to us of those confidential positions. And with that, we looked at the salary package, right, that is salary and benefits, but we looked at that full package in comparison with other districts. And in some cases, we bumped it up by a multiplier, and in some cases, we bumped it down by a multiplier, which is just how it landed. But that was by looking at other districts. And so it was kind of a 2-step process to say, okay, let's start with what we created over here, land a number to start with, and then look at that package in comparison. And we think we landed competitively and, we don't think. We did land competitively in comparison to people who do like similar jobs, and we're able to say, okay, we made salary schedules for all 3 types of employees at the same time.
Okay.
Do a lot of districts give benefit packages to their confidential?
To classified or confidential?
Well, you just said the districts that you contacted.
Yeah,
For
for
being
confidential,
Yes, because they're usually full-time.
Full-time. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and some are 12 month and so, like we're having, when we compared them, ours are 11 month.
11 months.
Yeah, right around 11 month, and then others are 12 months, so we're doing that comparison of the
Okay.
whole package. I think when I mentioned that, classified, we're one of the only, if not the only district, I don't know if that's true, that doesn't have a benefits package along classified, and so being competitive with that pay, you have to take that into account
Mhm.
to some level. And bottom line, we were trying to get up to bus drivers too, so that happened.
Gotcha. All right. Does that satisfy you?
Yeah.
Cool, all right. Mizu moved and
Well, second.
Abby seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Unanimous, thanks very much. Okay, then we're gonna go through our 9.5, which is the New Year action items, and you all know all of these by heart.
Abby doesn't, I think you should read all of them.
Yeah, okay.
That's your take home.
Yeah.
What do we approve?
She read it before.
I remember I saw this last year and was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna be there forever.
No, we're not.
I know, this part goes fast. I learned last year.
So I will entertain a motion here.
I move to approve the New Year action items 9.5, all of them listed under through 17.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor, unanimous, thank you. Discussion items, the closed building by the library.
I love it.
That's excellent.
I feel like we had to leave it there for the name, but we talked about it today.
Yeah.
But to that point, does anybody wanna comment on what we heard, or do we wanna move that to?
I thought he had great ideas. I mean, I don't know if we want to talk about it now, but
Not really.
no. Let's talk about it another
Next month we follow up.
But now we all
with-
have ideas in our heads.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even I thought that that might be a good like work session, you know, or
That's
something,
excellent.
or something.
Yeah, do we
Yeah.
wanna schedule one before September, or?
Well, when do we need to provide some direction to Kurt about that, so that he can make progress?
Like, you see moving on certain things?
Yeah,
Okay.
I feel like he
I
could
mean-
wait till between September and October for the, like, if,
Well, for that building,
well, yeah.
I mean.
We don't
it's-
know.
As soon as we want to.
Yeah, but he's, the middle school and, industrial arts building have enough to do, to keep him busy until
Yeah.
And the
then.
concessions building,
Yeah.
looks like there's some kind of immediate maintenance that needs to happen, so it sounds like there's stuff gonna happen
Yeah,
by some time.
but
We
I
do
do
have
think
to
we should
have-
get a work session,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
and even
Yeah.
an opportunity for community to maybe hear that part of the
Mhm.
findings and start to bounce that idea, and maybe do like a
True.
brainstorm session with that. Could be, if we, September
Take
20th
a
is.
very guided tour of any community members that want to come
Mhm.
through and around the building to really.
Yeah,
lay it
see
out.
where it's at, and I think
Mhm.
that, so the back to school barbecue is the first like big community engagement, that's September 20th, but if we looked for something kind of beginning of October-ish, and did something like a tour and presentation, similar, I mean, I think that part of the presentation is.
What does
the
that
part
require, like us wise, isn't it just like a couple of us form a committee or something, right?
Yeah, or I can I think we can do it as a community engagement
Oh, okay.
event, and
Yeah.
then have a work
That'd be
committee
cool.
after that, is
Yes,
what I was thinking.
That's a great
Be
idea.
Perfect.
Okay.
Does that, you have a different idea?
No, I don't know, I just like, my thought was like, we would have a work session, and then we would do that, like, community.
Then bring them in.
Have a
Yeah,
work
but-
session.
But I
with-
don't see why, it would be fine to do it the other way too, I was just, that was my like, look, that wasn't what I was thinking, but,
But it would just inform our work session if we had their input.
yes, definitely.
And I don't, unless somebody has other ideas to add to that, I mean, I think it's literally, let's tour it, use that part of Kurt's presentation, maybe
His
invite him
ABC
to do it.
options, yeah.
See I think we'd invite him and
Mm-hmm.
do that, and then have a, like, session where, a couple groups talking and kind of saying what lands with them and what the work committee should
I
be
mean,
thinking about.
what do we need to, we're gonna move ahead on that dangerous little piece of awning or overhang on that.
Oh, the
Concession,
football.
yeah, I
I
marked
think-
that as, it sounds like he's gonna even meet with Randy, but I'll make sure that
So
happens.
that just happens.
I think that sounded like a
Okay.
simple idea even,
But the
yeah.
things that we have to make decisions about, we have to start having priorities, and I don't know, did you want to meet before that, or did you want, does it feel?
Yeah, I mean, my thought about the work session was actually for all of the, not just the pool building, like,
Yeah,
the work
yeah,
session was like
exactly.
selecting options
for
for like,
sure.
the industrial arts building option and the,
Mhm.
Think about priorities.
Well, and maybe at that work
Yeah.
session,
Yeah.
then we can plan when you wanna have that presentation.
Yeah, so do
Right.
work session first,
Yeah,
and
I
then,
get it.
Because
yeah,
my,
Yeah,
he was asking for input about
Mhm, yeah.
designing the industrial arts building space primarily initially first, anyway.
Yeah.
And so I just,
The community one, we can do, yeah.
right, so that's why I was thinking of work session first, then use that to plan.
Yeah,
the
that
next
works.
Good idea.
steps.
Okay.
We wanna do that same timing, is that,
Or are you trying to do it before the next board meeting? Is that what you're thinking?
No, that's why I asked when Kurt needs that information.
I think it can be between September and October, based on that.
He's not gonna
Did you
move
read
on
that
that
this-
building before then?
Um,
Like, I feel like
there-
this one doesn't need as much of our
Right.
input.
We kind of can't.
we can't, because the funding
Yeah.
doesn't exist for that, it's
Okay.
more in his,
Overall.
he still needs to, I mean, he's gonna finish that plan no matter what.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
It's those like, in his design.
it's the next steps.
Then what do you do with
Okay.
it? So I think it could be between September and
Okay,
October.
then that's what we'll do.
Let's
Let's put it
land on
off.
that, and then I'll
Yeah.
confirm with them
Yeah.
and say, did you
Yeah.
need anything before
We
that?
could
So,
even plan that in an email or something.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, in
Okay.
a work session, yeah, you could come up with some potential things, and then, yeah, if you have the community thing, you could just have, you know,
Certain parts of it.
little presentations of it and have sticky notes like you do in some of your
Mm-hmm.
PDs, and, you know, people can throw up ideas or.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally, yes, yeah.
Okay, great. Tribal shared history. I just noticed these things over here. I don't know if everybody has seen
Yeah,
this.
they're up.
Oh, good.
They're up.
Yeah.
I mean, how do I get one? I want one.
They will be all over can you get one outside of campus? I don't know.
And-
Let me see. We have like 20 of them to put up, or is that true?
Well,
I wanna say the number
Well,
20,
now
but.
apparently we have 19, so.
Yeah. If one went to your house, I don't know. That means at the next meeting, you need to open with, actually using the language.
It doesn't have the QR code to instruct me on how to
Those
say it.
do exist near them.
They do, so it.
And then I've got a
Probably
box in my
right.
office
Right.
of like the smaller ones that are going up around campus and stuff, so.
But like in the gym, this is up in the gym and it has a QR code next to
Yep.
it.
Yeah, and Chris's room, I think, has it up, and then as teachers are coming back, those will be up all over the
This
place,
is so
both
great.
campuses.
Oh my gosh.
So that's happening, Anna Helms, actually, Jesse contacted me first, and then Anna Helms just left me a message yesterday, I need to return, so on Fridays, the tribe will be teaching language classes here.
Every Friday?
In partnership with them, yeah, and what I'm not sure of, and I don't wanna oversell yet, right now, those are classes for tribal members, and in partnership, we use our building.
Mhm.
I don't know if those are offered
Mhm.
beyond tribal members, I need to return a call, so. And then,
Did they talk about those giant posters being like pared down to like a little laminated, like half sheet size card that kids could take
That
home
can
and
use
put on
too?
their fridge?
I don't know, but
That'd
We
be
can.
great.
Yeah.
Like we
That's a
have on
great
our
idea.
fridge, we
Yeah.
have, you know those like word things where you can like create sentences out of
yeah,
words?
yeah, the magnets.
So we have those magnets and there's just like a bunch of pictures and there's a bunch of say slow words. And so then
Cool.
like Jada will just randomly come by and just put like to E next to Black Bear.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's really complicated and it's a bunch of stuff. But
Yeah.
like that poster with a little QR code would be
Yep.
cool and the kids could take it
Oh,
home and they
I
just put it
love
on the fridge and then other members of the family can like.
Yep.
But anyway.
I
Like that
don't
already,
think
that
they
graphic
talked
already
about that,
exists,
but-
you just have to print it and
Don't-
laminate it and give it to, we don't have a big enough student body to even make that be, like,
Yeah.
to even have an excuse that that's expensive.
Yep, done.
Can you believe this is happening, Kay? All this cool
amazing,
stuff
yeah.
at this little school.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
And there is I shared it out, I actually don't know if anybody on our campus signed up for it yet, but there's there's 2 PD opportunities now. One is the year-long cohort that Kate was part of that
Mhm.
partially was how this project happened. And then there's also like I don't know if it's 6 weeks or 8 weeks, something like that course that repeats 4 times through the year that folks can sign up for and do as well. And I know Jim Grano at the Watershed Council signed up for it and is sharing that with people across the region too.
Cool.
So,
Oh, me, screen time. Screen time. We had talked about wanting to address this with staff and students and community.
Yeah, so we're, as an administration, 100% committed to no cell phones in classrooms moving forward for all the reasons that we talked about before, and that they're and I'm a convert. I don't know if I shared that last time, but I used to think, no, that we're gonna have them with us all the time, teach them. And I'm a convert that, no, we're all addicted. And somebody told me recently, I forget where I was, but this came up outside of our community. And somebody said, do we let kids vape at school? And I said, no. I said, well, and they just shook their head, and I was like, you have a point. So, that said, to your point, a lot of people's point, but you made it most clearly last meeting, of bringing students into that decision-making and process. We're in a little bit of a balance of like, if we're gonna do it, we gotta communicate it and do it, and we need students to be part of like how we make that feasible, and so we're kind of at that tension point right now, and I'm just naming it out loud.
Mhm.
Alright. And that is it like in the classroom, so like during passing periods, could they
Yeah,
access them or not?
Most policies don't include passing periods or lunchtime,
Yeah.
but it's strict to the classroom use.
Yeah.
And then some of those, they have little rooms around, if the teacher says, get out your cell phone for this survey or whatever, you know.
We did the wiggle room last year and
Yeah.
wiggled our way to addiction
And I-
within about 3 months.
Right, and I also think that puts a lot on the teacher to have to enforce that, because kids are always like, well, it's right here. You know, and so then like they have to, that has to be something, or not, because they're trying to do other things.
Yeah.
Like awkward. But I also have to say that like, I'm used to being able to text my kid, like some logistical thing, like, you know, and have them get back to me during the day. I don't have to, I can get unused to that, because I didn't used to be able to do that. But it is something that like would take not just kids on board,
Mhm.
which definitely take families on board.
Which I know you said even like say beyond like how I know Mizu and I utilize the situation. You said like there's other families that are more extreme about it.
Yeah.
Like we use it just to make our life easier, like logistics of being out of town or whatever, but other families are,
Yeah.
oh, you have to talk to me because
Yeah.
I have to talk to you, or you have to talk to me whenever you want to.
There's also an element, I don't know if you've thought about, which is it's a privilege thing, I'll admit it, but there's kids who have watches. And
Yeah.
if their phones are in their bags, it doesn't matter, they'll get everything
They're
here.
still gonna see it on their
They'll
watches.
get every text, they'll get every
Yeah.
notification, they'll get anything, every call.
Or there's gonna be a lot of bathroom breaks.
I mean, that's a
Yeah.
device, that's the same thing as this.
Yeah,
Monitoring.
Yeah. I mean, we
Monitoring
just gotta talk
watches,
about
it's
that because,
more-
yeah, that's,
right.
I mean, people use that watch to also tell time. There's, like Ramil's coach, for instance, like, measuring how much exercise and stuff they get in the day, they can turn in their, like, watch data, which shows
Yeah.
like their heart rate,
Or
when they
like
were
their Fitbit
exercising,
time
how
or
many
whatever,
steps they
yeah.
did, if they filled their exercise rings, like, these are being used in an educational setting.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about cell phone usage,
Yeah.
you know, so, there's
Yeah,
some layers.
I do, yeah, I'm trying to think, and I think watches are becoming more common, so we're gonna see that more and more, right?
Like, where one kid would be
now.
like, oh god, my cell phone, that's a big deal, and I can see Ramil being like, that's fine.
I can still see it.
You know, like, okay, I'll keep my phone in my locker, not a big deal.
But also,
He can't really
Not-
text easily from it,
that's-
though. Like, he
that's
can't
the
be
part
on it.
I think is a
Can't be
difference
on your
is-
watch, but you can get all your stuff on
And
your
you're
watch.
not setting your whole music list for 30
True.
minutes, and you're
Yeah.
not doing the, like, those are the things.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
really,
That's true.
I would say, it doesn't stop the nonstop notification and gratification of
can
looking,
make
So
but
is it
have
more that they
their-
spend more time,
they
like,
can
I have to
do
set this playlist for this 30 minutes of this task you're giving me to do,
Yes.
versus communication?
it's both.
No, yeah.
I mean, communication,
But-
we know is gonna be the big
Yeah,
thing,
it's
you know,
texting
but-
back and forth out of school and in
Mhm.
school, and whether it's text or Facebook, or
Sure.
it's not Facebook.
Mess,
That's
all the other
Oh,
Snapchat.
Yeah,
and Instagram,
exactly,
yeah.
but it's that, and it's, music,
okay.
are I would say the two that are taking up a too large portion of the instructional day and the instructional learning experience.
And they're difficult to hold the line on, because kids are like, well, my mom needs to know this, you know, or, well, but like you said, I could use these headphones while I work, I need music, you know,
Yeah.
so I need to set it up. And
Yeah.
It's hard, it'd be really hard to.
Yeah.
try
And
to- Yeah.
my experience this year, music is the gateway to
It is,
being on your phone nonstop.
it is,
And,
yeah.
and that's and there are ways to do collaborative playlists in a classroom, or to put it on lo-fi, music while you have, so you have something that's got that. We do have a couple kids, like, they use music for regulation, but that is that doesn't need to be 24 hours a day, right? And so if they're escalated or something like that, that can be part of a plan, but that can also be to step out and to regulate yourself. And if music's part of that, the library space could be part of, I'm gonna go in there, I have 10 minutes to do this.
We had
and
to
then
bring our
come
big
back.
CD sleeves, and then we had to agree, and we put it on a CD player in the
Yes.
classroom.
Could the
I
school
pulled out
like,
my Destiny's Child, y'all, it happens.
could the school invest in like, I don't even know, are iPods still a thing? Or
I mean, there's
And
all
then-
sorts of just
I don't-
wireless
can they
speakers.
just
Yeah.
like, this kid, if they have it for regulation, can this kid just have a set thing, and if they need it, they don't have to be messing with the
With
playlist?
the thing,
or
yeah, and
just-
a number of kids, I mean, the answer's yes to that, whether it was an iPod or, I mean, it could be their own list, but now it's on and I think that's some of the teaching we need to do, is like, you're not de-escalating the whole 7 hours you're at school. And if you are, we have a different issue than the music, right? And so when are you escalated, and how do you use music to de-escalate in a time frame that like has time, and I talk about, I don't know if I've shared this with y'all, but my youngest son, when he was in 2nd grade, came home from school, brand new teacher, and he was like, oh yeah, we have this space in our room, and you go over, and he explains this whole process of, you turn the timer, and you do some breathing, and then you can have a choice of like 3 things you do at that station, and when that timer runs out, you can ask yourself, am I ready to go back, or do I reflip the timer and get one more time through? And then if that timer's going and you still don't feel like you can participate, now you need to ask the teacher to come over and have a conversation. I was like, I'm not gonna worry about you this year. Like, I knew that was a classroom that was
Wow.
like safe, right?
Well, maybe.
And so that's 2nd grade, but that's not any different than what we need to teach kids to do at 9th through 12th grade, or 7th through 12th grade, right? And so where we put timers on those things and say, hey, if you're taking 20 minutes, or if you're taking 8 minutes to de-escalate, what, let's get further into what's going on here, and we need some other supports in place. The music isn't saving you, it's just distracting you in class. We need a de-escalation strategy, not a distraction strategy, so.
And then what about the kids in elementary school? Are they gonna be allowed to have it during lunch and recess? Or?
Yeah, so we talked about, like, we're not seeing use over there. It really is a 7th grade thing, and it's not, I mean, I'm sure some of them have devices and stuff, but so far we're not seeing it as a distraction. If that becomes, we have evidence of like, oh, just kidding, it's into
Yeah, I
lower
don't know.
grades,
I
but
mean,
we did talk
Jada
about.
Was in 6th grade last year, and I would text her a logistical thing knowing she would not get back to me until school was out.
Yeah.
And it could be something as, I'm gonna get you, Tina's gonna get you, you're getting on the bus. Like, it was actually something where it's like, my daughter might not make it home if she doesn't get this message, but I
But can that
knew
constitute like a
that she
call to
would
the office?
not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we've talked about.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, that's how
But
my
Well,
mom
no,
did
no,
it.
no, I don't call the office, yes,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I also communicate with her. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is the expectation is already there.
Yeah.
Like, I already knew she wasn't going to get that message
Yeah.
until
And the
the
fact
very
that's
end
not,
of the day.
yeah,
When
and
she takes
that's,
it out of her bag.
And that was not weird.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling
Yes.
if we don't change anything here, the conditions will be, not saying, I mean,
It'll
Jada
change
might
over
wait till
there
the end of the
eventually,
day, but,
Yeah.
Oh, no, she won't.
She'll get you-
peer pressure. Like,
Yeah, yeah, she's gonna rate you right back
She'll be like, well,
within
now it's
5
okay.
minutes.
Yeah, no, no, no.
Now I can
because
see
that's-
mom's message in 3rd period.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
or I can check it out or whatever. Like, my point wasn't that I don't call the office and all of that. My point was that at elementary
It
school,
doesn't seem like an issue.
not even in 6th grade when they have phones.
yeah, that is basically what we heard, so.
Is there something that they can be taught, like prophylactic over there at that age to,
Uh,
I don't know.
I mean, to say like, you guys are doing well, don't pull them out later. It's not a
But
bad
once they get
idea.
over here,
I
until this
do-
habit has changed over here,
Yeah,
every
that's,
7th grader that comes
Yeah.
over is gonna go nuts.
To the
'cause
same
then you
point
give a
of
mouse
the
a cookie, yeah.
vaping education works in 4th and 5th
Yeah.
grade. I
Same
think you have a
thing.
point
But I
that,
think
what do
that-
we do in 5th
I mean,
and
I
6th
don't-
grade that helps them not
Yeah.
turn into that?
I like just,
Yeah.
yes, make a rule, but I think just because it is such a habit, I think it's gonna take a lot of buy-in, and that will have to include
Parents.
and student,
Yeah.
and what do they think? Like, how can you help us figure this out better?
Well, and like, for my, I mean, I've texted 3 times to my family in this meeting. Like, I don't need, like, it's been logistical, all of it, and like, how are we getting home, you know, stuff like that. But like, I could have checked my phone at the door and they could have come sat in the room if they needed me or something
Yeah.
like that, you know. But it's habits, it's family
It is,
habits.
it
It's
is.
like, and they have the expectation that they're gonna be able to get my help with stuff whenever.
Yeah.
But
You
you're
know,
in a
that's-
meeting, you're like, your phone should be off.
That's what I'm saying.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I'm just
I
saying that
mean, they
like,
won't be able to get to you and they'll learn.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It just
Yeah.
needs to be, but it does need to be, like, we'll all need to reform a new habit around this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So-
I
and
mean,
this
I
is-
left the house without my phone, and midway I'm like, oh shit, I left my phone. Like, you know, yeah, you did. You're gonna be okay, Michelle.
The hardest thing is, if you don't start the year with it in place,
Yeah.
it's really hard to
Yeah.
go backwards.
Yeah.
For real.
And it's also August something,
Yeah, that's what I was
16,
wondering, I don't know how you get it,
and that engagement
engage with the kids to
becomes
figure it
hard.
out.
So we are kind of, it's a hard spot, but we know it's the right thing to do, and I usually don't lead from a,
You know, you're better
Yeah,
off
this
to
is it.
have the hard no, and then if you can form and adapt to some sort of,
with their input.
yeah, and you reach a
I think
happy
that might be-
medium.
Or what about saying, we're gonna spend the fall doing, like, figuring this out as a district, you know, with families and communities and students. We're gonna implement the policy that we come up with on January 1st, you know, whatever, we return to school in January. So that would buy you time and have a hard date, and if you tell the kids that's what's gonna happen.
My only thing on that is, if you have, it's the same teachers in the same class. If I show up on December 13th and it's been like, you know, we've kind of had these things that are loose, and you know, in some classes it's more than others, and then, hey, don't forget January 1st when you come back. It's still the same, it's harder to switch that
Sure.
behavior.
And I think parental wise too,
They're
they'd be like,
used to
why?
contacting
What was wrong with
this
September,
year.
October, November,
Yeah.
December?
Yeah.
And now in January, I can't, like, you know.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do think that the easier, and one of the things I had thought about is, for the first 3 weeks, it's a no, and we're gonna engage some conversations
Yeah.
around it, so that we get input on, okay, when, where, why, are there any extremes, and really hit hard the why, and the kids know the why.
Yeah,
We
they do.
We know they do, they just need us to respect them and listen and honor that it's hard for us too. And we need to, you know, as administrators, like, I'm on this thing all the time, and I am gonna be in a classroom with it in my hands sometimes, because I have to do 3 things at the
Well,
same
and
time.
what do the teachers do? What do they see with them? I mean, you're
Yeah.
different, but.
Yeah, so I think teachers, it's, how do I wanna say this? I think it varies by staff member, and I think that's true across K-12, pre-K-12, and I think that's true across EAs and educators and custodial and bus driver, right?
I mean, do you have a
It's
plan
different.
for that? Like,
So
I
some
think
of
the
this is.
teachers are one of the serious ones that it's like, they have to
Well,
show by example.
And we,
Yeah.
and the one, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but the one thing I believe about leadership is you don't ask somebody to do something you don't do. It's gonna be hard for me to say no to everybody and have this in my hand, right? Like, but I
mean, you
think
hold a
we've
different
talked
role.
about
Yeah. You're
where and
managing
why
your-
and those kind of things.
So-
And I will try to step out when I'm using it. There's just times that, like, that's actually more annoying than me returning that one text and then keep going, right?
Yeah.
So,
Will like would that include sort of then radios for like, or something, cause when you have students like
Yep.
with a class outside.
Yep.
But often the office will need to contact and say, send a student back to the office.
So we've talked about the fact that cell phones are not the most reliable on this campus anyway.
That's right.
And so there are many times, like, you two have definitely experienced it with me, where, if I'm at the elementary, I cannot, I don't get anything, and I can't send anything out today, whoever was with me in the music, I couldn't make a call, I have to go off Wi-Fi, on Wi-Fi, off Wi-Fi, on Wi-Fi, and then it'll call. So we shouldn't, for safety reasons, be depending on cell phones, out here, and so increased use of radios, and we've talked about trying to get that in place. And we have radio systems separate between the two campuses. I want one that talks to each other, like
Mhm.
little one. Yeah. So,
So you're
anyway,
gonna start off the
that's-
year as the hard no,
I
and
think
then
it
work
has
that
to.
first month to like, is there a different plan
yeah.
that the kids can live with or not, or that you can live with too? Okay.
Yes, and if it's, when I was teaching, I was hard on, I mean, there was supposed to be no cell phones, and I took plenty away. First time I'd give it back at the end of class, if I took it away more than once, I'd give it to the principal.
And
And
that's,
stuff, and you'd have to get it from the principal. And, but yes, the students know which teachers are going to or
Yeah,
not.
sure.
And you need to ideally have staff on the same
Yeah, you gotta train
thing,
them.
because then it's the, so doesn't make me.
Yeah, exactly.
what was that?
That's exactly how they say it.
That is exactly how they say that.
And I just want to listen to music, and, which was a big thing in my, I mean, teaching computers, I mean, I might talk for the first 10 minutes and then we'd have the next 80 minutes of working on a project, and it was like, well, plug your headphones into the computer now.
Yeah,
And there are, I mean, we have devices. This doesn't get rid of the
they're just not,
playlist
they're
issue.
just, they complain, cause like at
Yeah.
our school, like I said, they lock them up in a locker. And, but my music, well, then they still do it on there, it's not the music version they want to hear on there, it's
Yeah.
not the same platform they want.
Yeah.
But, they, I don't know, they somehow get by.
So when did your school institute this?
A few years ago.
And the first year was held? or-
Oh, yeah, it still
Oh.
is held every year.
At the probably the beginning of the year. more
Yeah,
so, right?
and
Because
it's
they
when
had-
you get new kids or
Yeah.
whatever, and certain ones, they figure out how to get away with it and they can catch it. I mean, it is literally ongoing all year long,
Yeah.
but they get them at our school, we have a morning break time, a lunch time, and an afternoon break time. It's not like passing periods. They can totally come and get them, and they get them the whole time during the 15-minute breaks, the half-hour lunch. They can come up and ask me if they can get their phone out and use it. And typically it's fine. If you notice a pattern, it's like, oh, if you need to call your parent, you can surely use my desk phone. You know, why can't you call your mom on my desk phone? So we play around with a lot of that. They hate it, and music it always comes back to music, but it's ultimately communication, but their thing to base it on is music. So, and they say, well, I'm waiting for a call from my mom, or they're gonna come and get me. And I was like, they know my number too, and I'm sure they will call.
With
the
parents
school.
where I could be like, I'll message them for you.
Yes.
Well, and communication wise, I mean, I don't know how much this teachers are using Google Classes, how often in each class students are doing stuff, but they all have email addresses at secondary level and stuff, so if you
Exactly.
want to get in touch with your
Well,
students.
and
email.
that's happened before, like when, like my kid knows she can't have her phone, she'll send me an email that I'll see later in the day.
Yep.
And if I can't get her, because I know she's either in the art building or whatever, and I need to say, hey, I'm running late, or, you know, I can't pick you up at a certain time, or whatever, I also just call Jamie.
I was
I'm like,
gonna
hey,
say,
if I need to talk to Morgan, I
yeah.
have her come down and
Or whatever.
talk to me
Yeah.
on the phone, or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jamie is like, if you need something done, that's who you should call,
Yeah.
right? Like, she's great about it.
Or have
probably,
her
too.
call me
Yeah.
at lunch,
Yeah.
and then she can just call me
Yeah.
then, so.
I don't think we'll do a lock 'em up
No,
thing.
that would be too hard for you here.
Yeah, but I think, like, the expectation is we should not see them in class at all
So,
the first month of the year, and then we'll kind of figure out the rest. And if we're saying that and it's nonstop doing it, then the conversation is, hey, like, do we need a lock it up policy or an option for that, or what? How do we make this work for y'all? You know, and just the why over and over to families and
Right.
students.
Yeah. Because actually, like, I mean, I know we gotta move on, but like, the kids don't use their lockers much, at least most of them don't, I know.
Not like only middle school.
Not my kids, they like they put stuff in their bag or whatever, so they're gonna have their phone with them unless
Mhm.
there's some other place.
Oh, yeah, you'll have bags in your room all the time.
Right, but like, I find myself like, I mean, I'm totally addicted, like, I find myself thinking about, oh, did I'm sorry, some, you know, like, I don't even have to, like, so even if it's like, so having it another step removed, I don't know, is a good thing, but
Yeah.
kids don't use their lockers, so.
A lot do though.
Some
So,
do.
yeah,
Yeah.
and if you can't have it near you in class, here's your
Yeah.
locker. We have all the things in place
Yeah.
for
Yeah, I-
success.
So I was just thinking that like, if you're not already planning on it, maybe not having it even with, on the kids in the
Mhm.
classroom
Yeah.
is important.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll work
Helpful.
out the
Yeah.
details, but I'm really happy to
Yeah.
see this moving forward.
Yeah.
It makes me so happy, and I don't know if it makes sense to help educate our community by, like, on our website, we have some links to some articles
Yeah.
about how damaging these things are to our
Gosh,
kids.
if
So-
you watch some of the documentaries and shows.
No kidding.
Yeah, we've been Kay and Joy have been talking and working on some of the communications for
Mhm.
this, and I assume there's articles and stuff connected to that too. I don't know if that's for sure, but we'll make sure that that's part of it, so.
I just wanted to ask you a question, the point that Mary made about the watches, do you have any input on those?
I don't on the watches, I have to say, I haven't really thought about the watches, because it's not as
You
in
can
your
have,
face
none of your
as
watches
the-
required to be like on do not disturb or something, so they don't get notifications, but I think like for telling the time and, exercise and all of that, like that, I mean, that stuff is tracked, but in other academic situations. Is it in, you know, English and literature? No, but, you know, for after school soccer, for my son it's soccer, I don't think there's anything at Mapleton that uses any of that data. But there is, like, exercise journals and things that my son's required to do, and a lot of that's recorded through here. Partly because he doesn't go to cycle slot, right? So they don't have like to proof that he does like whatever weight training, or that he's running a mile, or that he's doing that stuff. So he does that, and his watch does that, and then he sends that report to his coach.
I will say, I was involved in we got rid of cell phones in the classroom at Lowell. And what it involved was basically a couple of letters home to parents, like, this is coming, now it's here, we've got a couple days, work with your child to manage that. And, you know, I never blatantly said, and manage your own behavior, but it was implied. And then just a couple of things about what research says about the different type of educational loss that happens when a kid can't engage in the classroom.
I love that.
And
I still
it
don't
worked,
understand how they
I mean, it was
couldn't
2
use it.
weeks of
I
really
can't.
tough
I can't listen to these at 12.
and then after that, it settled in. And so, but that 2 weeks was, we also put off-ramps in place, so like at the quarter, if a kid lost his phone privilege, or their phone privilege, which, because we, at one point, if they couldn't follow the rule, we said you can't have it at school. But then when the 9-week quarter ended, it was a restart. And so that just, you know, it meant that the kid had control again instead of, yeah, so.
Well, it's great that we have you who've walked this road, and Andrea knows about it from her school. We've got some examples to help us.
Joy's done it in Portland.
And, yeah.
Yeah, and I will say, it really is getting the parent on board. And we didn't go through the kids, but I like that idea of we're gonna have an after conversation.
Yeah, like,
So, yeah, we just thought that the kids would just say, we don't wanna do this. And so we didn't even ask.
Well, and that's what they will say, but you know, you'll see how bad it gets. that
some,
first
but I'll
week.
tell you, we did the youth listening voice session
Yeah.
earlier this year, and one of the ideas that went forward was building a cubby for them to turn their phones in and have that choice. They would, like, they get it. They know that they need something, and so that's where I wanna work with them and kind of pull that back out and say, hey, this was a thing. We know when it's top down, it's not as good a thing, but it's also, here's the timing, here's why we did this, and what do you need to make it work? And if it's like, I'm gonna break the rule and get in trouble and it's gonna be a power struggle all the time, maybe we do have an option alternative thing for you. That came up earlier, those kind of things, but they get it. You know, there's a difference between following it and getting it. So-
Well, even you. I mean, when I first brought this up to you, you were like, kind of lukewarm, and you just said you made the conversion to the,
Yeah.
the reasons we're doing this.
Yeah.
So this is good.
Yeah.
I'm so happy. I'm gonna just move on with, I think restorative justice and practices. We can talk about that next month because it's getting late. Honoring Johnny, you brought this up when we talked.
Yeah, so, Johnny Sunstrom did pass away last week. And, it's come up in a couple spots. So I knew he had a long time track coaching and big influence on the community. I didn't know he was the voice of Mapleton football. And so, trying to think about ways to honor, him and his service to the community and impact on the community. I did talk to Carrie sometime today, and the gazebo out at the track, she had talked about making that like something connected to like Johnny's gazebo or something. I don't know, she probably has something way more creative than that, and I think had talked to the family at some point about doing that. And then another potential that came up in that same conversation was on the crow's nest. The thing about the track is like it's so far out there that you don't always experience it, right? But maybe on the crow's nest doing some sort of mural there that kind of connects to the track as well. So there's probably other creative ideas. I asked about, my original question was about the scoreboard and if there's something on there, and we talked about like there's some reasons to not do that, and it's hard, it's a harder thing than it sounds like, but then we thought that was a good kind of alternative, or maybe better.
We know some local muralists, by the way, so.
Yeah, and I think one did, well, anyway, there's quite a few in the community. I think somebody did the one in the gym, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what the connections.
Right, and she was one of his track
Yeah,
students.
but I think that's who came, I forget the name, but,
Lola.
yeah. So,
Cool.
I don't know if others have ideas or, something, but what we talked about is, at the first home football game, hopefully doing something that's like, pretty immediate, and I forget when that game is, but, it's coming pretty quick. So,
Yeah, even just having whoever is announcing that game need some little piece. And,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I like the gazebo. I like the timing gazebo thing because like that was
Mhm.
like he was instrumental in getting that track built and resurfaced. Well, not built, but resurfaced or surfaced in the first place, and then coached for a long time. So like I think it's fitting. I think those things would be really good.
Great.
That's awesome.
Side note, the gazebo, I don't know if you know, the steps had rotted and were gone. They're rebuilt. Coach Jessica and her husband built them the other day. And
nice.
so if you're out there, there's steps back to the gazebo, so it won't be
So cool.
a gazebo without steps in Johnny's honor. So, yeah.
Okay, board stipends. This was new information to me that,
Yeah, so this one came through on a text, the superintendent text thread. I think I sent it out to y'all. That's like somewhere legislatively it passed that there can be board stipends for board members' time served on being a board member. I believe it's up to $500 a month. I sent it to you guys and then I forgot it. Sorry. And just to like, so far I'm not aware of anybody in the county actually doing something. A lot of us had not heard about this, and so that was the reason, like, where did this come from? Sent it out, and it's not just like, hey, we're board members and we deserve to get paid. There's especially in large school districts, maybe large isn't the right. Well, anyway, the purpose of it is the inequities of people who need to work and can't serve and be part of a board, right? They can't run because it competes with their need to work, is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, I sent it to you guys. Hopefully you looked at it. You can take whatever action or non-action on it, but I wanted to make sure that people knew about it.
so, I mean, yeah, to some of us, it feels like it's kind of antithetical to the democratic nature of being, volunteering to be on the board. That equity piece, I'd never thought of it before. I can't imagine that it would be, and people get enough money from this
To not have-
position
you have to
to
work.
like, I mean,
Exactly.
really, that's what's gonna make you or break you. It's up to $500 a month, but, you know, I'm not feeling like getting paid for being a board member at this point. I don't know how y'all feel. And one thing that Sue suggested is maybe when we're running, if we have an opening, and maybe someone says, oh shoot, I would do it if I got paid, maybe then the board would discuss it again. I don't know.
Yeah, I think listening for, yeah, when I was saying that, like, if there was an opening and we were listening for, oh, I'd be interested, but, you know, those kind of things, maybe it's just like, oh, wait, there is a possibility, and maybe that is a need, so.
Yeah, a paid board position kind of changes the nature of the board in a way that I'm not very interested in. And honestly, even a new board member, generally, if people are like, I wish I could, but I can't, it's because of time. It's never been because of money.
Sure.
It's not like, sorry, I mean, I need to be paid to give, you know, 3 hours once a month or in a couple of work sessions throughout. Like, that's not the reason. It's usually because I'm like, I'm just at capacity. And so throwing $500 at someone doesn't all of a sudden change someone's capacity.
Sure.
They might be like, oh, now I'll do it for the money. And they're still not giving the amount that they should be giving because they really didn't have the capacity in the first place. So I'm in the camp of also not adopting any sort of pay or stipend. I mean, anytime there's been like excessive travel or, you know, OSBA events and stuff, that's covered for us anyway. So, I mean, that would be the only argument I could see if someone from Deadwood was like, that drive, that mileage, gas is expensive, like, I don't know, considering a stipend or like reimbursed mileage, I would not be opposed to something like that. But paid to be on the board, I'm not in that camp. That's my 2 cents.
Exactly, yeah.
I served on the ESD board for, I don't know, close to 10 years, and I did get the mileage. They just, it wasn't even, they didn't even ask me, they just gave it to me.
You're
And I
many
never-
miles away, you're like 56 miles away from the ESD.
Right, but Mapleton, you know, and they said, you know, you could ask Mapleton to reimburse you. I see it as in-kind donation, really. It's like, I can do this thing.
I got a T-shirt with like tribal words on it.
Towards
and
your
people that, like,
stipend.
I have to pay for
Speaking
that,
of
and I'm happy. I'm like, oh my
Speaking
god.
of which, I don't know where they are right now, but I think I have, I'll find them and get them to you.
Yeah, for real. Okay, well, we said, we did it. Okay, we'll take that off. And public comment on items not on the agenda.
We did have one.
We did have
Yeah.
that one.
So she had to leave, that's what I told her, I'll call you on
Okay.
it. Did you guys see it, or, the question was, and I can't, hopefully we can just make it public in here on her behalf, but then I'll call too, but the question was about the PD, late start, and, isn't that what the purpose of the shift to a 4-day week was? And, I have no clue the history of when we went to 4 days. I assume it's a
It was
lot of cost
budgetary.
saving.
It was
budgetary
budgetary.
things,
It
and
was
so-
budgetary.
yeah, that was gonna be my call and say, hey, what it did provide is, the practice has been 6 PD days spread throughout the year. And that does provide some quality PD time, however, not the consistent collaboration piece that the hour provides. And so I'll call tomorrow and explain that, but I wanted to make sure to talk
Yeah.
about it with everybody too, so.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, any more comments from?
Wait, can I ask, what year did it switch to 4-day?
Oh,
We started asking today and nobody knew.
I don't know.
I was in probably 5th.
Kyle Tucker was here.
Grade, yeah.
So I think, well, in Kruger, Tyler, it happened.
He was a year ahead of me. I bet you it happened when we were in
It
7th.
was, yeah, it was
grade.
it was in middle
So-
school for him, because I
Yeah.
remember Elaine like going off about it to our family. It was
So-
amazing.
Yeah, because then he had nowhere on Fridays. Yeah.
tumultuous, yeah, he had nowhere on Fridays to go.
2000.
Yeah, so that must, and he's a year older than you,
Yeah.
so 7th grade maybe?
Probably,
And
because
he
that
is
would be.
29, he's turning 30 this year. So in 6th grade, he would have been like 11, 12, 13.
That sounds about right, because it was a few years
So-
before Jody, so
So
yeah.
20, so like 16 years ago.
Yeah.
A
Okay.
while.
Yeah, and I assume
Ish.
that was
I mean, that is a
the
very
cost cutting
ish,
measure 5
but
stuff, so.
No, it's very, it's
15
very close. 'cause-
15-ish years ago, 15, 16 years ago.
The, I lost my thought there, if you hear from anybody in the community about it, I sent it out through Parent Square and there's an RSVP just for numbers on there, but we will have,
Open gym and.
yeah, and tutoring options at that 8 to 9 o'clock hour.
Well, so how did, oh, go ahead.
What it won't provide, so transportation is gonna run an hour later, and so, but if a family's like, I need that, but I can't get kids there, have them contact us, we will help figure out a plan, so.
So how did you end up, like, cause I know originally when you said you were doing this, it was meant to be that all staff was
Yeah, we are.
involved.
Yeah, we're using, community, so actually through Europe, we can do some tutoring, funds and use a community member that's outside of staff for that, so.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't require any staff people to
It
manage?
won't be somebody who needs PD and will, they're not on the regular staff, but they'll be able to
Okay.
do that hour,
Okay.
yeah.
And open gym as well, so we'll be.
We're gonna call it related, so.
I had one other question though, and I didn't know.
There's always a fund somewhere.
I didn't know where else to bring it up other than here at the end when we talk. Doesn't, like, how does the student body raise money? Like, aren't they supposed to have money to like do things, dances or events or things like that? How do they raise money? I feel like I don't see a lot of opportunities that they fundraise. Cause like individual class-wise, I know we're so small, it's kind of hard to see how, like, I know I was used to growing up in my school and probably Mizzou, even at this school, even my daughter when they were in school, but like, I know individual class-wise, I don't think they separate and raise money in the same ways. I know there's not class offices in the same ways, but like, I would think as a student body whole, don't they fundraise?
They do, and there's student body funds, I'd say it happens in lots of ways. What I will say is, I don't know if this is like a blame COVID thing, but it feels like it, that I think some of those practices that were in place all the time kind of fell away during that time.
Yeah, because I know I ask a lot of questions over the last couple of years to my kid, and
Yeah.
it's always like, I don't know, they don't do a lot of the normal events,
Yeah.
and then they don't do any of those activities, and then I'm like, well, also I don't see them raising any money, so I just feel like there's not a lot of effort that goes out.
Yeah.
And then there are students who who want to do that.
And maybe it's
stuff.
not being head in the right way, I'm not sure,
So,
but.
Don't you do the wreaths still here? Don't the
There
kids-
are,
they did
I
some
saw
wreaths
wreaths this
this
year.
year.
I saw wreaths,
But there's
and
not like 50-50 raffles every game,
Yeah.
so it used to
Sure,
be,
yeah.
or things
Yeah.
like that.
I mean,
yeah, concessions is concessions the primary fundraiser.
Yeah.
We've been working with Booster.
Well,
on
but
how to
that's my
organize that.
problem is, I
It
don't
can't just
think
be
the booster wants to do it. Like, I don't feel like, I know my daughter's part of the booster, and I heard it months ago, and I don't feel like their job is to do other stuff to be supportive of the school and not take away from like fundraising that the school, the student body could
Yeah.
have in whatever
Are you-
way.
Have you met with Carrie on
No,
this yet?
no.
Okay,
She kind of talked to me this
Okay.
afternoon, but I
there's
told her.
so.
But I think it's being put out there that they're doing it.
Not quite. I
And
mean,
I
it's
don't-
like, anyway, let's get back together, because I thought that conversation had happened and I just told coaches something, so.
No,
let me-
just today, she's kind of
Okay,
said something.
Let me,
But yeah, there was
make
like
sure
a bunch
you
of messages,
connect
and I was
and
like,
then-
everybody's so mad, I don't know.
okay, let me talk to you after.
Because I just feel like there's other like, and so then when I'm asked that by my daughter, and which we've talked about earlier in the summer, and this is my older daughter, who's
Yeah.
part of that with Abby, but they do a lot of other things to raise money, and because I know the previous booster type thing we had before, like, we're doing different things to help the school and fund things, not in the way that like concession stands is just always like, that's such a easy free way for the school in whatever sense to make money.
Yeah.
Whether it's each sport, whether it's, I mean, to me, I feel like it should be a more student body thing, because I know as a parent, I don't wanna be obligated to be in that concession stand
Yeah.
because I'm here for a game, and my daughter shouldn't have to hurry and be in there right after her
Yeah.
game, and then also the boys and girls teams can't support each other because they have to go man this, and then the parents are always the ones who just end up taking care of it, but I feel like it's just such an easy thing to have it be a student body fund issue.
And it'd be nice to see the kids working towards something
Yeah,
and
like
raising
50/50
money.
roughly, you're right.
Yeah, those.
That's gone.
So it just really made me think, I don't even know what they do to really put a lot of effort into fundraising.
Don't they have car washes? And-
No.
No.
I mean-
I will say last year, the reads, there's probably three, on this end, 7 through 12, I can think of beyond concession stands, I don't, concessions happen at most things, but beyond that, I would say maybe 3 things I can think of that were a fundraiser.
Yeah.
And elementary had some more, like the jogathon and, something, I can't remember what it was. Anyway, these things don't register very well. Sorry. But
I would have to say I might see more fundraising efforts on the elementary side than over here.
I think there are. So I think that's a spot to go. And my assumption is that there were things like, if you think about prom, right? So this senior class would have been, I forget how that works for juniors raise it for seniors or something.
That's hard to do in this
But
school.
these
I just think it
juniors-
should just be put on.
But I think it actually used to happen,
It
but
did,
these
yeah.
juniors didn't have a regular freshman year to start that process.
I mean,
The
I guess
sophomores
so,
weren't raising
but
that
there's
money, so it
adults that had
falls
those
out.
things.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see that
Yeah.
they falls on the
Yeah.
student.
So that's
Like,
the-
if I was a teacher or staff
That's
member
the
here,
one.
Okay.
and I said
That's the
I want to
thing.
be in charge of the student body and their things, well, heck, I went to freaking school and
Yeah.
I know what happened. Like,
Yeah.
it falls on the adults. It's not the student.
Exactly, and
They
there
can go
are
over it.
teachers that are supposed to be in charge of these different things, whether that's student body or that's, junior class or
They get
whatever.
paid to do it.
And then there were, I also just wanna say out loud, for the record, it seems that there were some promises and attempts made that were not followed through, and the students can only do so much
Yeah.
on their own. So, I know students are talking about, senior trips and all that kind of stuff, and that's all gone away, and they're not feeling very empowered to be able to create that for themselves. And so I think maybe that's where some of that confusion with Booster and things have come in, because I feel like students thought that now there's a way for some of these things to be re-implemented rather than rebuilding the structures that used to be there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And I think I see that it's coming from other adults in that form too. Like that's maybe the gateway to get the things, like the booster thing versus like what you're saying.
Yeah.
Let's bring back the regular
Yeah.
structure of.
because what they should be doing then, if Booster is gonna support, it might be like, we need help, I don't know, chartering a bus to go to Disneyland.
Yeah, and then
Booster
could
can
offer-
help with that piece, but the actual trip to Disneyland, all of that
Yeah.
fundraising is happening with that class.
Yep.
That's how it used
That's
to be.
what Booster is for.
I mean,
Yeah,
but
there are support
boosters-
systems.
Boosters actually
Yes.
existed alongside the
Yes.
students.
I
And
wish,
they're
yeah, I
separate
wish
from
there
the
was more
school.
staff that communicated with the booster
Mhm.
also as
Yes.
well, because there's been none.
And
Right.
staff that
No
are in charge of
communication
those
between,
things
so we don't know.
need to
Right,
follow
okay.
through or have it clearly laid out that this is a
We
part
don't
of
know
their
what they
job,
need-
this is
what
why we
they
pay
need help
them.
with, we don't,
Not to
Cool.
sound harsh towards the teachers, I know they're super, they're doing amazing work, and they're
Well,
like
yeah,
at
like back when there
capacity,
was
but.
an honor society, even like they would
Yeah.
do their trip to Seaside, or
Yes.
whatever, right? You know,
Yes.
like I know there's not that now, but it's like that's what those things are for, right? Your 50/50 raffle, your concession stands, like we need to raise $1,000 or $2,000 to go do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a teacher, yeah, we'd rotate through teachers and, have 2 of you assigned to
A club, a group.
each grade level and stuff, you'd
Oh.
move with them. And yeah, I mean, it was just part of your responsibilities, it wasn't a stipend or anything.
Yeah, and they're stipends, right? They're not.
These.
Not those things. I mean, there's stipends for some things.
Yeah,
those
but
things
not
are
the
just
student
part of the
council
deal.
things, right? Like
Because
they're
then
just.
they,
Student council is a stipend.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I mean, there is a stipend, I think, for prom. I'd have to look at all stipends there
But just fundraising is a really good skill to learn as a kid.
Yeah.
Well, and they learn to work together and collaborate on that, like if, say, they're in a club or a grade level class, like say the junior class was doing something, but yet well, our girls are gonna be in the basketball game, but they can, if they wanted to, then they could choose, okay, well, that's the junior class night, and if you've worked it out with the rest of your class, that they're gonna manage it, fine, but if not, and there's a hole, then you have to go out there after your game and work that too, but that's a different entity than like,
Now, I mean, so far I've seen concessions be all sports based. I feel like everything that's lasting this last year has been sports based, and that's just what I'm walking
But it
into.
did
What
not,
reason
that's not what it ever
didn't used to be, it
Yeah.
used to be class based, like the
It
junior
was.
class,
Yeah.
junior class did
Juniors did basketball, seniors did
Right.
football.
Yeah.
Like,
But last year, like, I'll say, from almost the beginning, it was
I know.
sports teams doing it, and the reason was those classes weren't organizing, they weren't showing up to do it, so nothing was happening, and then
Right.
sports teams were like, I'll
but
run
I think
it,
there's
and so
a
there was
reason
a
that
shift
these
there. Yeah, so that's what I
classes
would
and
say,
student body
we need to
aren't showing up
reorganize
or
that.
no.
And also, for me, it's not, like, we're talking a lot about fundraising, but it is not the fundraising that for me, that's like kind of the thing I want to make sure that is, like, kind of,
It's
but it's
the
student,
doing.
it's
Yeah.
student planning, and not just
Yeah.
the doing, but their ability to have a vision to like,
Yeah.
let's, we want this trip
Learn
in
it.
our senior year.
Yes.
But right now, they don't, or we want this dance in December,
Yeah.
rather than in
Yeah.
May or something like that, right? And like, they can come up, anyway, I think right now, part of the reason that fundraising isn't happening is because they don't.
They don't have
feel-
anything they're working
Yeah,
towards.
they don't have anything they're working towards, and they don't feel like they have a solid structure. So I don't think that the fundraising structure is like the goal for me. That would follow. The goal for me
Yeah.
would be like a structure of like student-led events or student, and you know, I don't know, how to, what's the right.
Yeah,
term
and
is.
like some short and intermediate and long-term goals, like, you know, the short terms for like those dances that happen at certain times of the year. Long term is like these freshmen should be thinking about where they wanna go when they're seniors.
Totally.
Like Ramil's thought about it, he's all stressed, he's like, I did nothing last year, I'm like, Ramil, calm down, it's okay, we've got time. He's like, no, we don't, when you were in school, you said, I'm like, I went to school with 1,600 other people, calm down.
Yeah, and it
It's gonna be
is
fine.
a different thing for, you know, this school in this area, but
Mhm.
they could still come up with something.
Well, and the fact that there is precedent, it's not like we're trying to create something in a small
Right.
school that doesn't exist, I mean, this did exist,
It did
and it went
happen.
away, and there's not real effort
Yeah.
into making sure that comes back.
100%.
And one aspect of this that I wanted to talk to Sue about sometime that was brought up at my business conference is ASB accounts, student body accounts.
They need a student treasurer.
Yes, they are supposed to be student-led things.
Absolutely.
And whereas we have like I don't know what all we have, we had the electric car and Leaf and stuff that are in the student body accounts, and it's like, okay, these aren't things that students are leading
Mhm.
and stuff, and so they shouldn't be in student bodies and stuff.
Yeah, good point.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, Andrea. I don't know what that means for your plate, but also, I mean, parent involvement is big. I mean,
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I know I didn't go to school here, but Jesse definitely talks a lot about his culture when he was here, and there was like a lot of the money raising and things like that was done at school, but it was the parents that, you know, got the band to come and they rented out the, you know, Lions Club and put on a huge like mosh pity concert for them. And it was, you know, parents that helped like do some of the logistical stuff. It wasn't necessarily the teacher that did the logistical stuff because those parents had to sign off. You know, Jesse's class was pretty good, pretty big, it was 26 students, so there was a lot more coordination, I think, but there was a parent piece too that could maybe be, you know, cultivated. I know I would be, I can't do it by myself for Rimmel's entire class, but I would be more than happy to help, you know. So I feel like other parents would be on board.
Remember the big auction?
Mm-hmm.
Man, they raised like buku dollars, and that was parents, that was not students, and that was all centered for the school. If there's, parents can't
Yeah,
get involved.
Totally. And then that can be in conjunction with Booster, you know, maybe Booster sponsoring something, but, you know, parents and students are really the ones leading.
Oh, yeah, if they have a, you know, a grade class level advisor that works with a committee of 2 or 3 parents to make things happen.
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
Look at that.
look at us go, Kay, we're just,
Well, hopefully these line up somewhat with, you know, the
Yeah.
structures that, yes, like
Oh.
staffing structures and stuff.
Yes.
I don't
No,
wanna, I don't want us to be
there are
like
s-
saying.
And there are things we're
Yeah.
working to
Yeah.
organize and land that this helps, inform.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this isn't landing out of nowhere, so,
Yeah.
but just to say, in terms of what's on the plate, I mean, there's a few pieces of it that are new, but, we know it's a need.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for Nizu's point, I mean, this is educating our kids.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
That stuff looks good on resumes, it looks good
Oh,
on
yes.
applications.
Oh, yes.
But also they
Well, and
don't
it's
want,
fun.
they don't
Yeah.
want it to just be on the resume, they wanna actually do something.
Yeah, they actually wanna dance.
Like,
Yeah,
They
they
wanna
wanna
actually wanna go to the
Yeah.
Space Needle and to EMP and go to
Yeah.
Pike's Market
Like a
and
real problem.
go to
Real
Richmond
problem.
Starbucks
Yeah.
coffee, yes,
Yes.
all those things.
Right.
Okay, well, it's 9, normally we have like an hour to 2 hour meeting, this one is through
Well, we did
3.5.
shove 2 months into one.
Yeah. Well, we had an hour-long presentation. So.
Yes, we did,
Point
we did, I'm just gonna say, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I think it's because Abby's on the board now, we're just gonna.
She's like, what did I say? Nobody just wants to be around me.
That's what it is, Abby.
We adjourned this.
Second.
meeting.
Moved and seconded, let's go home. Thank you so much.
Third, fourth, fifth.
Awesome.
I don't like dinner.
Can remember going